Welcome, everybody, to this show in which my friend Rebecca and I yell and flail about K-dramas. Because what else are we going to do in 2020 in a pandemic? And also, it's pretty much all we've been watching in 2020, with only a few exceptions.
Amen to that.
Pretty scary when I looked back at all the things I watched in 2020 and I went, these are 99% K-dramas. Cool. Rebecca, what are you watching right now?
Honestly, right now, the only thing that I am watching is Weightlifting Fairy Kim Bok-joo.
Did you know I love so much?
I don't have any currently airing on my list right now, although I'm probably going to dive into some here soon because I'm finally getting to a point in my life where I can relax and watch more TV. But currently, all of my time is dedicated to Weightlifting Fairy Kim Bok-joo, which I am deeply obsessed with and will hopefully be done in the next couple of days, but also never want to be done with it ever because it's phenomenal.
Whereas for me, per usual, I'm balancing like a billion shows. So currently airing, I'm watching Awaken, which is a thriller starring Namgoon Min, which is really cool and weird. I'm watching Please Don't Date Him, which is such a great title. It is very adorable. I've got The Uncanny Counter on Netflix, which is an utter delight. It is such a
That's on my
delight.
list. I want to watch that one really badly. Yeah.
It's so wonderful. And I am also watching Run On, which is also on Netflix. And I was watching because Im Shi-won is in it. And I love him from Mi Sang Forever. I'm pretty sure that is all I am watching right now. I think. I'm just going to roll with that.
We think.
But I figured today, since, the year's winding down, we have, 4 days left in 2020. Can't come soon enough. We're going to talk about all of the dramas that came out in 2020 or completed airing in 2020 that we watched. Because if we were going to try and talk about all the dramas I watched in 2020, we'd be here a while. It's well over 150. It's disturbing.
Yeah, it's been a big year for K-dramas.
It was.
Being locked at home with not much else to do.
Like, what else were we gonna do? And so we're gonna rate this on a scale of 3 groupings. The first grouping being those that we thought were great, like just really, really good, even if we have small nitpicks with it, like it's a great K-drama. We're gonna have another big category, which is a sliding scale from you were like really good, but not great, to you're fine, you're meh, you're kind of here, but you're not awful. And then we will have the most dishonorable, which are those we would honestly pitch in the garbage. And that's probably going to be the most fun, let's be honest. So, Rebecca, do you want to start from great to garbage or go from garbage to great?
What if we did something crazy and we started with fine meh and then went to garbage so we can scream about the garbage, but then end on a high note with the great?
I love this plan. So let's start with our first one, which will probably be a little controversial given the general opinion of this show, which is Crash Landing on You. It's not great. It was almost great. This show was almost a masterpiece.
Almost one of the best K-dramas I've ever seen, honestly. Like, up until the last couple episodes, it literally was. Matt, I know you watched it, you binge watched it after it aired.
I did.
But I watched it live with my housemate and really good friend Katie, who actually got me into K-dramas. So we occasionally will watch a K-drama together. Always an enjoyable thing. We chose Crash Landing on You. We were obsessed with it. Like, we were mad at ourselves for watching it live because waiting the week in between the episodes was just killer. We would plan our weekends around, like, when are we going to have time to watch Crash Landing on You? Because I think it came out on Fridays and Saturdays. And we would always wait for 2 of them because we were like, there's no fucking way we're going to watch one and then wait a whole day for the other one. So it was like a whole thing. And we were so obsessed with it. And we would rewatch episodes like during the week in between. Like, we could not get over it. We were laughing. We were crying. We would talk about it constantly. My husband about lost his mind. And then we sat down to watch the freaking 2 finale episodes. And we were just absolutely speechless. We were like, what the F just happened? It was like the worst ending I've ever seen in my life. So mad, I'll let her tell you her story. But when she was like, oh, I think I'm going to watch Crash Landing on You, I'm like, okay, well, prepare yourself for a fucking amazing drama with the most garbage ending you've ever seen. But maybe you'll love it. Maybe, like, we're just bitter because who knows? And maybe we have a weird opinion. But, I'm just letting you know that we were super disappointed and very what the actual flip at the ending. And so then I got Mad's, like, live tweet while she was watching it, and I will let her go from there.
Yes, it is well known that I essentially just barrage you with messages while I'm watching any K drama because I also know you don't care about spoilers. So I can be talking about any drama under the sun and I will just throw spoilers at you while I'm watching it, being like, oh my God, please just get all my knee jerk reactions. So I did go into Crash Landing on You after it already aired. I knew it had been extremely popular. I also at least knew the lead actor, Hyun Bin, because years and years and years ago, I watched Secret Garden back when I was like, boy, you need to put on 20 pounds of muscle because you scary thin and your cheekbones don't look real. He looks a lot better in Crash Landing on You. I was like, time did Hyun Bin good. And so I had asked, like, before, probably around the time it had finished airing, I'd been like, oh, so you watched it? I'm like, should I watch it? Like, it's on there, but I don't love the description. And to be fair, the descriptions of K-dramas on any site are usually terrible. Like, they really do a disservice to the shows. And Rebecca had said, it's so good until the last two episodes. And then you will probably hate it. But again, you never know, you might like it. So I went in and was just giving my live react of how I essentially love everything about this. I'm like, I love the banter. I love our little ducklings, which is what I was just calling the North Korean soldier squad. I was like the little ducklings following their mama duck of Hyunbin. And also the rat was my absolute favorite character, hands down. I loved him. I wanted to hug and protect him. And he made me cry through like the whole thing. And I was bracing myself because I knew I'm like, I'm just going to get let down. I'm going to get let down. And I get to episode 15, 16. And yeah, I got let down. I just remember live chatting in all caps that they did my con man so fucking dirty. They did him so dirty. I was so angry. I was literally just like at my computer going, what the fuck? We did not actually just do this. We just fucking did this. And then came the wrap up for like the main couple and how you get through the issue of he's a North Korean, she's a South Korean. We're not going to have reunification by the end of this show. So how are you going to get them together? Because we know how this works. Or are you going to be ballsy and go for the bittersweet ending? They weren't ballsy. They didn't go for the bittersweet ending. And I honestly did not love what they came up with. I think it required too many random time skips. It just required a little too many hoops that were being jumped through. It felt like, ooh, did you hurt your back on that reach to get to that ending? Like, literally, until those last two episodes, I went, this show is a masterpiece. I went, everything about it, the side characters, the main characters, the dialogue, it looks gorgeous with some questionable CGI in the beginning, but what can you do? I mean, that tornado don't look real. How do you fuck it up that bad? How do you decide to throw away your second male lead in such a way that is just disrespectful?
Well, it was just unbelievable. Both of those characters, honestly. So the second male lead, who is Gu Sung Jung, and then So Dan, the second female lead, to the former fiance of Hyun Bin. That was that was the most upsetting part to me. First of all, his death, which was so out of nowhere and so unnecessary. Like, there was no, like, where did that even come from? It was one of the stupidest setups I've ever seen. And then it happened, and I think that was right at the end of episode 14, maybe, or maybe it was 15. I don't remember. But then, like, the next episode started, and we were like, okay, but is he dead? And it was extremely unclear. Like, it was extremely unclear. It was never established until you get this scene later of, like, Sodan is, like, grieving. But there's nothing else. Like, it is completely ignored by everyone else, by the rest of the story. There's never, like, a moment of confirmation. It's, like, super delayed. It's like he dies, and then, like, halfway through the next episode, she's really sad for a scene. And that's it. And it was like, what the heck? Like, he was literally a main character, first of all. Second of all, the part of his story was never like, ooh, I know. I am going to be a, like, hero, or, like, and he was, like, never even really even in the scenes where he was in danger, because let's be real, everyone was in danger in that show, like, on multiple occasions. It never seemed like he was in danger. Like, it just wasn't, like, it was a really weird choice to have him, like, go down saving her when it was completely unnecessary, especially because she was from a prominent family and, like, very easily could have been saved a great many ways. But, like, for him to go after her to prove that, like, it was more important for him to protect her than to, like, leave the country and protect himself, kind of. But the other thing that really pisses me off, okay, so there's a lot of things about this. One is Sodan, like, literally lived abroad, like, a lot. Like, that was a big thing about her character. And so they had this setup that was perfect, where like he can't be in North Korea, he doesn't want to be in North Korea. They both have had this whole thing where the people that they like love, if you could even say he ever really loved Sayri, have chosen other people, but they've found each other. They have the most adorable side romance, like so many feelings, but so sweet and like comedic too. Like it was amazing. And then it's like, okay, yeah, he's gonna leave the country, but we first met her when she was coming back into the country, and it's like established that she regularly spends time outside the country, and that's like part of her whole character. So like great. They're gonna reunite outside the country and they'll live outside of North Korea and like whatever. That's their story and it's gonna be really beautiful at some point in the future when they like meet again outside of the country. No, instead he's gonna die, but then it's not gonna be acknowledged that he dies or like confirmed that he dies. Even in the scene where she's like crying and really upset, you don't even really see her. It's like her mom and her uncle who have no idea what's going on. And so like they don't even talk about like him or acknowledge him. Like there's no catharsis there, even though I don't think there could have been, even if they'd somehow done that well, just because it was such a stupid and ridiculous move. And then her like so Dan's story being like, oh, I'm just gonna live my life like single and I'm happy with that, was like the stupidest ending to her arc that I've ever
It
seen,
really
because she was
was.
never like I'm super dependent on a man and I'm super dependent on being married. Like that wasn't who she was. She did love Captain Ree, or like she thought she did. Like she loved the idea of being with him. So she already had a growth arc there where she realized she didn't need to be with him and she didn't need to love him, and it was okay to like let him go, and like, oh my god, maybe I have feelings for this other guy who's more like suited for me because we have this understanding of each other and whatever. And like that's great. Like that's her arc. She doesn't need an additional arc of like, maybe I don't need no man, because her initial arc wasn't I desperately need a man. It was just I'm in love with my fiance and I want him to love me. Like I don't know, it was just a really like messed up thing where I was like, where the fuck? Honestly, it felt like the last two episodes were just written by someone who had gotten a brief synopsis of the show and didn't actually like know the characters or their stories or their arcs or their trajectory, especially those two. It was just like, what the living F did you just do? And the other thing was even the main couple, like having them meet for 2 weeks every year in Sweden. Okay, it's a compromise, I guess. But also, it doesn't make sense. Like, there's no history to suggest that he would be in, oh, sorry, Switzerland. It's Switzerland. That he would be in Switzerland every 2 weeks for a year. Like, I don't know that that's a thing, but sure, she can go there. Like, that's not a problem. It's fine. And there's like a poetry to them re-meeting there, but then that just being the end of it, especially with the previous scenes where they're talking about like having a family together and like how much they want to like grow old together and all of this stuff. And then like that's what we get. 2 weeks every year in Switzerland. Okay, like I don't
It's
know.
not
I
even that it's
just
bittersweet. It's just unsatisfying. And I
it's
think
extremely
honestly,
unsatisfying, and I
yeah.
wish they had gone one way or the other. Like I wish that they
Yeah.
had gone the true, like the straight tragic ending of like, but now we wish for the reunification of the Koreas so that one day we can meet again. Like that would be a really powerful thing and like was kind of the underlying message of the whole show. So like I like it would have been sad, but I would have been here for it. Or one of them leaves their family behind to go be with the other one.
Hmm.
And kind of that was like a like it would suck and it would be sad, but that was the expectation that I had. I honestly thought she was going to end up back in North Korea.
I almost thought so, but I was kind of rooting, as terrible as it sounds, I was rooting for the tragic ending because to me, I'm like, this would be the more powerful ending, and I think it would tonally suit the show better. As for the second couple, I honestly think they just killed him for shock value.
No,
I think
totally. And
and
it's
that's
so
all it feels
stupid.
like. It is. It's utterly ridiculous because he's never shown himself to be a self-sacrificing person. Why in this moment does he decide to? And as much as we know he kind of likes her, like he thinks she's hot and he definitely likes her and there's this romance that's blossoming, I do not think they were at the point where he's like, I will willingly go get shot for her and die. It's the
Yes.
ending ruined what could have been honestly a masterful drama, and it distresses me greatly. Speaking of endings that also ruined perfectly good dramas, Dodo So So La La So with the absolute worst ending I have ever seen since Cheese in the Trap, and that was the hallmark of a shit ending. And this, oh my god, it's so annoying because this show was so goddamn charming. Like the
Well,
entire
okay,
front half of this
I'm
show
gonna
is charm.
pause. Yeah, I'm gonna pause you there and say the first like 10 episodes of the show were incredibly charming. Just like the warmest, sweetest. Like I remember when we were both watching it, there was stuff going on in the real world, and then you were watching some shows that were pretty intense, and like things were happening, and it was like, I just need some dosol right now. Like I just need some of that, like feel good, sweet, charming as shit. And honestly, they had it set up perfectly for like what the actual issue in the story was, which is that he was underage at the time and needed to resolve the issues with his parents and then like grow up a little bit and then they could meet again in the future. They even had that like foreshadowing with like the grandpa's story and like how they were separated, but then they met again and then they got married and spent the rest of their lives together. And it was this beautiful thing. And they found each other through music and whatever. And so it was like, that was supposed to be the parallel, right? And then like we were just going to have like the last several episodes of like him growing up and like what's going on in their lives and who are they as people, and then they meet again and it's this beautiful thing. No, they just like totally like went off the fucking rails with it in a way that just didn't make sense. Like the writing was so poor, and the last several episodes there were so many just like, wait, what the f is even happening here? Yeah, it was like weirdly resolved things, and then the like weird the cancer thing, like I can't even talk about that. I can't even
I'm so
talk
mad about
about
that because we should have done that with the second male lead. Like, we kept hinting that the doctor was sick. Like, he had that pill case. Nobody knew what it was. And we just ended by saying it's effing vitamins. I'm like, no, you should have done it so that he secretly had cancer. Therefore, when he gets back together with his wife, this should be a journey they go on while he is ill, and she stays by him while he's ill and has to actually take care of him and notice him and pay attention to his pains so that he's happy, which was the whole issue of their marriage and why it broke down. Versus suddenly giving Yi Dong-wook cancer. Not Yi Dong-wook, Yi Jae-wook. Yi Jae-wook. I can get these all right,
yes.
it's fine. Lee Jae-wook, like suddenly giving him cancer, having him pretend to have a girlfriend to break Goara's heart, and then have him completely renege on that, and then be like, I'm going to study in America. And I'm like, okay, I hate this already. Like, why couldn't we actually just have him studying in America? Because that seems to be a thing that rich people in Korea do anyway. So like,
and again, like it would fit into the story. Like he's just gonna go study in America and then he'll come back several years later and they get to like re-meet and reconnect, and like that's a story and it's an interesting story and it would like fit with the overall. But instead, like, I'm going to study in America. JK, mom's telling you I'm dead. And then 6 years later, surprise, I'm not though.
that is literally, they did that character so, it's so bad because one, it's just bad writing in general. Then it's so bad because you do that character so dirty. It is wildly out of character for what we've seen of that character. Like, his goal in life is Goara's happiness. How in the fuck is this Goara's happiness? That's number one. Number two, it's like, it's the cruelest thing you can do. Like, just point blank, period. Tell your loved one that you are dead. Convince them by using the one person who she would have to trust because this woman doesn't like her already.
Yep.
And then zero contact, and then show up as if nothing will have changed. It's presumptuous, it's conceited, it's cruel. It is none of the characteristics we associate with Lee Jae-wook's character. It makes no sense for that character at all, and they literally just threw his character under a bus.
Well, and then there was
brain
no
damage.
and then there was no resolution to it either.
Nope.
Right? Because he, like, it's like the last 5 minutes of the show that he just shows up and it's 6 years later and we've established, which this was stupid, by the way, is because they didn't actually resolve any storylines except for maybe the two kids who then had their business. Like, that was kind of cute, and that did happen a little bit in the story. But everyone else, like, it was like build up, build up, build up, build up, build up. And then the last 10 minutes of the show, we have this time jump and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, all these things happen. But they all happen off screen in that time jump when we don't see them. And so we don't get to experience the catharsis of that.
Yep.
Or like see it happen. And it was terrible with like all the side romances and everything that was happening. It was just like, wait a minute, what the fuck? But then it's 6 years later. She has believed he's dead for 6 years. And then he shows up while she's playing piano in her studio. And they go and they talk, and it's just like, oh, and now we're going to kiss, and you're alive, and it's great, and we love each other in the end. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, it's been 6 years. Like, you don't know anything about each other anymore. Most of the cells in your bodies have changed. You're very different people. And also, the last that you knew of him was him sending his mother. So now you know that it was a lie also to say that he was dead. because that's somehow better than worrying about him or knowing that this issue is going on. So it's supposed to be this great love story, but it ends with him completely removing her from the whole process of support in one of the biggest things of his life, lying to her in a big way, like you lying about being dead, like having your mother come in her mourning gear, crying hysterically, telling you that he's dead. That's a breach of trust that you cannot like get over ever, period, end of story. And
Yeah.
then also, like, just the whole thing was just like, no, like, I don't feel good about this. I don't even want them to be together anymore. Like, I just really don't even want them to be together. Now, if we had had, like, a whole episode where they, like, get to hash that out and work it out, or even better, just like he's gone and he's being treated for cancer in America, and it's sad and it's scary, but it's years later, and then he has his triumphal return, whatever, and that's the ending. Like, that's great too. Like, if you have to do that storyline, there are so many ways that you could do it without it being just that bad.
Yeah, they just wanted to like wallow in the grief of these characters. Like they deliberately set out almost the entire that episode to just cause you pain for no reason and then go psych at the end. And I'm going, that's rude. It really was from the moment June got home, like the moment that his mom showed up and took him away, that the story kind of went off the rails. It was like they didn't know how to reconcile things. And I said, you know, you can take it slow. Like it doesn't need to be this big crazy drama of a billion things happening. We kind of like when there's not much happening and we just get to enjoy these small sweet moments.
Right, which was like the whole first half of the drama. Like it was just a very slow, just like gentle, fun, sweet drama. And then it was all of a sudden like, what the literal F is happening?
It was like they changed writers halfway through. Like I don't know what happened. I'm dead convinced by this point they just changed writers halfway through and that they were throwing darts at a wheel going, what trope should we use now? Let's bring in the ex-girlfriend and fake a relationship. Like, let's bring in cancer. Let's pretend we're dead. Let's fuck off to America for a couple of years and have no contact. Like, it was every single bad drama trope thrown into the entire back half. I will forever just have a bitter taste in my mouth thanks to that, and it makes me sad. Although speaking of other shows that left me with a bitter taste, one big one, you didn't watch this, I did, and I was kind of excited for it, was More Than Friends, because it was like literally telling me I'm getting a friends to lovers romance, which we know I am a sucker for. And it was the way this drama was structured and the way they wrote the characters was terrible, but the performances kept it afloat and kept it good. I mean, it was
So
actually
this
very
was
interesting to
Shin
watch.
Yi-eun, right?
I remember it was Ong I can never pronounce his
Ong
name.
Sung-woo, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Ong
yeah, it was Shin
Sung Woo.
Yeon. So I feel like she just needs a better agent because I feel like she is awesome and she keeps getting thrown in these dramas that are just not awesome. But anyway,
The only good one I liked her in was He Is Psychometric, and like that's the only one. Yeah, and it was sad because like her character for the most part was written well, but they kept trying to do like the push and pull of will they won't they, and then bringing in the second male lead who, God bless him, he was like a puppy. They threw him under the bus. It was so sad because God bless Kim Dong Jun, and it was just I cared more about the secondary romances than I did about the main one because the main one left me so frustrated because they wrote the male as like wildly emotionally unavailable and the female lead just throwing all of the blame and guilt onto him when she is also at fault for some of these, and the drama made it seem like no, it's not her fault, it's totally his. I'm like, your problem is you neither of you communicate for the whole show until like the last episode. And I was like, the only reason this works is one, the side romances are fabulous. Like they really are good. And then also, yes, the performances of the two leads are good and they make really bad writing seem not so bad, which is in itself a feat. Next would be Memorist. Like I watched it, I don't even remember it. Like I really don't even remember it. It's right now I'm like
the
it
irony
exists.
is there is amazing.
I know, right? A guy who can like read other people's memories and I don't remember it at all. And we have yes, to all the guys who loved me, who I was very excited for because it's Hyun Min. I was going into this and not realizing it was actually going to be a past lives romance until I rolled up and started watching and I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, are we doing past lives? Sort of, kind of. There are like three past lives that this main couple has, in which, and all three of them, they ended tragically. I'm like, okay, I see why we're going for a fourth time as the charm, I guess. Even though she is adamant she will not get married, and it's fine. it's not, there are parts of it that are really good, but most of it, I'm just like, you're like a 3-star show. You're here. Like, you could have been better. I see the potential. I'm not mad at you. But like, I've also seen much better past life romance. Okay, let's do someone that we both watched. Extracurricular. I really do hate the ending. Again, with a passion. Other than that, for me, like, it was fun at first, but it kind of got redundant as the show went on. And I was like, I'm waiting for something that I don't think is coming, but I don't know what it's missing.
Yeah, I think this one was missing again the catharsis. So you
Yeah.
have this in the fine Matt. I would put this in the pretty great. The reason for that, from my perspective, is like it was hard for me to watch the first couple
Mm.
episodes of this one because the main female lead, I don't remember her name in the show, but she was so unlikable. It was so like painful to watch these interactions, and I just like wanted to kill her. And I felt so bad for this kid who was like just kind of like this sweet little kid who had nothing. But then what I really liked about the show is it really confronted the fact that even though he was like a likable hero and you wanted to like root for him or think of him as a hero, like he literally is a pimp. So it like then dived into, first of all, it had like the characters that experienced the trauma and then like the whole world of that. And so you see the confrontation, I think, between the character who was the prostitute in his school and him at the end was really powerful to me. And I thought it just did a really, really good job with that subject matter and with telling a different kind of story. But I think the problem was by the end, you are rooting for the two main characters so much. I'm sorry, of course, my dogs have chosen this moment to start barking. But you're rooting for the two main characters so much because you've been on this journey with them. And at that point, you maybe even like ship them a little bit. I couldn't even decide how I felt about that in that one scene. But also, like, you shouldn't. Like, you shouldn't be rooting for them and you shouldn't want them to, like, on the one hand, like, from a human perspective, everyone should have a chance at redemption and at happiness and you should have compassion for them and whatever. I don't know that they really earned it necessarily in the course of the story. I think he was on that road, but she was just kind of trying to escape towards the end. And so the problem is that I think the ending was a cop out because I think they just couldn't decide what they were going to do with it and like what the catharsis was. Like, was it that he's going to have a chance and they're going to leave you with that little hope that like he's got a chance and you're rooting for them and they're the main characters, so we want them to be able to escape and live happily? Or is it that he gets arrested and has to confront his crimes, because that was a possibility? Or is it that he gets killed because he got involved in this like deep seedy, although how he got killed, like, did I think that like high school wannabe gangster really deserved that much screen time? Maybe not. But they like chose an ending that was at once all three of those and then none of them, because you just don't know what happened. Did he die? Did they get away? Did the policewoman find him? Like, we don't know. And there's probably not going to be a second season, so we'll never know.
Another one we both watched, When the Weather is Nice, or is the even longer title, I'll Come to You When the Weather is Nice.
Yes.
Which I know is based on a book, which I have not read because these books are impossible to find in English. The only reason for me this wasn't great, I think there is the element of the final episode where I take umbrage with her just fucking off back to Seoul and being like cutting everyone out. I just won't talk to any of you. Where I'm like, phones exist. You literally dug your phone out from where you buried it at a tree and you couldn't make a phone call to him. And it's just left really ambiguous as to what she's going to do. Like, is she just going to stay there part-time? Is she going to go back to Seoul? Like, it felt very like, I don't know what to take away from this ending, which, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I love Park Min Young and she's fabulous in the show. The other characters, her mom and her aunt, those two characters were so powerful in this show. And those actresses are just phenomenal. I love them both, and they absolutely slay in this show. But then the only other romance I really cared about was the secondary romance. And again, Yi Jae-wook, adorable sweetheart. How effing old was he in this? Like maybe 20?
Yeah,
He's such a baby, but he looks like he's 25. I'm like, How is it you look like their age when they're all like a decade older than you? But yeah, no, this show, like, it was fine. It was really good, but I couldn't call it great. And I think it was mainly that last episode where I went, "You're losing me with this decision that I don't agree with."
Yeah, so for me, this one is hard for me. I think it teeters a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I am happy with it in this category because there was a lot of greatness to it. Like I really liked it's definitely a very slow, atmospheric drama, which I'm here for. Like I don't need all of my dramas to be like slapdash action. I really, really loved a lot of things about it. I thought the writing was phenomenal, but it was
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I think it was better for everyone except for the main characters. The mom again and the aunt, like and the even the grandma, just like that whole like their family and that story and what all happened with that and the acting and everything was just absolutely phenomenal. Like it was phenomenal. And even the side characters, like yeah, like EJ Wook's whole character, like it was kind of just like fluffy on the side, but it was amazing and I loved him. And the main male character's little sister, whose name I should remember because it was like a huge deal the whole time. I loved everything about her, like everything about her character was amazing, but then also that she had that like teenage crush on the one guy, right? Just like based on that like one interaction. And it went through the whole show and it was great because it finally got to the part where like he probably had feelings for her back. Like she kind of like broke down his barriers and they had the whole book club thing. And it was super cute. And then he's gone off to college and then she meets like another guy comes to their school who has the same name and suddenly she's obsessed with him. And I loved the realism of that. There is so much in a lot of media these days that's like these teenagers who just absolutely fall in love and then it lasts for the rest of their lives and like whatever. And it's like we've all been teenagers. That's not how it works.
You have a new
You can
crush
be
every week.
yeah, you be
Like,
fickle
please.
as shit. And also like you feel things deeply, but like not necessarily for that long. And so
Exactly.
I love that. Like that was beautiful to me and
It
I
was
was
so
like, "Oh
good.
my god, this is phenomenal." And I did love a lot of things about the main couple. Like there I had a
Mm.
lot of feelings in a lot of their scenes, but there were a couple pieces of it, the writing that I felt like just didn't make sense or didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And like part of it was the beginning where like she
Mm.
confesses her feelings and then he runs away and then he doesn't want to talk to her, blah blah blah, and then he just decides, no, never
Mm-hmm.
mind, like we're gonna be together. I don't really feel like the story ever really addressed that or like why he was that way or like what was going on there. And it was one of those things like a pet peeve that I have in stories where like people can't just talk to each other and like
Mm-hmm.
explain what's going on. Like it's a totally fine. Like I know it had something to do with his past trauma and like this like fear of being abandoned and like he can't have good things. But I don't think the story really quite figured that out. Like it was more just like they were like, "Oh, he's going to freak out and this isn't going to happen right away." But then there was no real like why. So then she never got a why from him either. Like it was just kind of like, oh no, and never mind all that. Like we're together now and it's fine. And there's this whole thing where even like in the second to last episode, or possibly even in the freaking finale itself, she is talking about like how like he's the love of her life and they have like this like really powerful love or whatever. And then when she decides she's going to go back to Seoul, which I think was important. Like she needed to go back to Seoul, sure, but then she breaks up with him and her voiceover is like, it was just like the one summer's love or whatever. Like we all have summer flings or something. And I'm like, I'm confused. Like, wasn't he the love of your life? Like you were just talking about this, like this
Yeah.
like whole poetic thing. And then when she goes back and gets back together with him again, it's like this weird like our memory of great love and like it's going to overcome everything. And I'm like, like less than an hour ago, you were telling us this was a summer fling. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. I thought that was really stupid. I hate the forced breakup. Like, that's another
Mm.
big pet peeve of mine. Again, like, I think that there was a certain extent to which, yeah, she needed to go back to Seoul and like reestablish who she was and her life and figure out, because that was part of her journey and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. And I just need like K-drama writers to understand that like long distance relationships exist or even like I don't know where we're at, but like if we're ever going to be in a good place, I have to figure myself out and then we can
Mm-hmm.
figure each other out versus like I don't love you anymore and I'm leaving, goodbye. Just kidding, I loved you the whole time. I'm back. I hate that. So that really bothered me. And again, like you said, like they didn't resolve any of the issues in the final scene. They were just kind of like, "Oh, don't worry, we love each other." And so it's like, but what's going to happen? Like, is she going back to
Yeah.
Seoul? Like, have you guys now realized you can have a long distance relationship, even though in this same episode, like, apparently that wasn't an option? Or like, what's the plan here? So again, yeah, it's like, no, I don't feel good about that ending because I don't have any trust in it to continue based on the last episode alone. Like, the story could have been so much better if they just hadn't bothered to do that in the last episode. It's like sometimes I feel like writers feel like they've resolved something too early, and so they have to shoehorn something else in,
Yeah.
and it ruins the whole trajectory, and I hate it. And that happened in here. That's it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder as to how that is a part of the book since they are basing it on a novel. But again, since I haven't read it, can't find it in English, so therefore will not be able to read it unless I magically learn Korean, which I don't see that happening because magic is not real in that sense. I cannot osmosis Korean via a computer. I am not a mermaid. Yeah, it is interesting for a show that was so intent on delving deep into the psychology and trauma of its characters because they really, especially in the storyline of the aunt and the mom, and also even the aunt's like ex-boyfriend, which like I was hardcore shipping for them to get back together because it was so beautiful. And I think they tease that maybe it's gonna happen because he's legit like her puppy slash slave and follows her around, and I love it. Like they took so much time showing you the background, the emotions, so that you essentially were psychoanalyzing. The show was like psychoanalyzing the characters for you, like giving you all this understanding. And yet, all we get of the main dude is okay, yeah, he has a fear of abandonment, but like, really? That's all it is for why he gets a confession from this person he's been in love with like for most of his life, and he just bolts like Usain Bolt out of there? Like, no, you need to even if he's not going to tell her because he does seem to be a character who doesn't express verbally a lot of things. Like, okay, I can be peeved at that, but understand. You need to show the audience. Like, we at least deserve to understand. Or I'm going to be left sitting here going, but why? A splain show. And yeah, that, and again, that final episode of this sort of flip flopping back and forth, this like fickleness of the female lead, I was like, okay, I just, you were so good. Why do you hurt me in this way? Like you were about to be so great, this beautiful little quiet thing, and then no. So another quiet drama that ended up sort of just existing and being a little boring, despite the presence of Jung Hae In. A Piece of Your Mind. I remember you telling me this before I went to watch it. I think I said I was going to watch it, and you had already seen it, and you said, "Oh yeah, its ratings were so bad that they cut its runtime from like 16 episodes to 12 or something." And I was like, "Oh, yikes! That's
They did that
yikes."
early too. Like, it was like after like the second week it aired or something. Like after the fourth episode, they announced it would only be 12 episodes.
Yeah, it's so sad that there's like parts of this show that are like weirdly lovely. The fact that it's trying in some ways to tackle the concept of like grief through these different people, and how they're all connected to one woman who honestly we did not spend enough time with, so therefore I couldn't really form an opinion on her other than I guess she exists. What there was no point to it.
Yeah, so I think that my feelings about this one are that it completely lacked a story.
Yeah.
That it was a concept, and they started with a concept, and it was an interesting concept, but
Mhm.
then they didn't know where to go from there, and they also just didn't go anywhere from there.
Yeah.
And I watched this one live. So, like, what I remember pretty well is the first two episodes happen, and you meet his, like, former love, whatever her name was, who ended up being, like, a main character, even though she was dead.
Dead.
Um, and he is, like, clearly into her, and they have this, like, later when they meet again, but you know he's eventually gonna fall in love with adorable ass lead female who I freaking adored. But she also then is like married to someone else, and there was like this tease of like something going on in their marriage or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be an interesting story about these relationships, like these intertwined relationships, which it kind of still was. But then when she died at the end of the second episode, I was like, okay. Like, oh, okay, I didn't really
Well
see
then.
that coming, and that's what? Okay, like I guess that's where we're going with this. Like, okay, and then the rest of the show, like I just feel like I had so many questions, but by the end of it, it wasn't even that I had questions that were really like worth answering. It was just that my question was like, what was that? Like, what was it supposed to be? And I don't no, like I feel like they didn't flesh the stories out very well for anyone. There was a lot of like character inconsistency, and then there would just like actually was no plot. And the AI, like I feel like that was kind of supposed to be the plot, but like not really. Like we didn't delve into anything to do with the AI or what it really does. I mean, like they kind of had this side story about how, oh no, this is going to be an interesting like mental health tool
Hmm.
um to like help people connect with the like bright versions of them. Like that was a whole side story that was interesting. But also like how was it related to the main? I don't know. I don't know what was going on. Again, like I think the issue with that show is like the writers just had this concept, and I think it was a cool concept, and again, like I think there was a lot of it that was super lovely, and I thought the relationship between the two main characters had some really beautiful moments, although like their one single kiss scene was like the worst I've ever seen in a K-drama. And like okay, like that, whatever. Like there was a lot of like beautiful moments and just like these quiet but like powerful moments in the show, but there was nothing that really tied it together. There was nothing compelling about it. There was nothing moving in the story. Like it just kind of like existed. And so I'm glad that it was cut down a little bit, but then I'm also curious like what they would have done with the full 16. Like it's hard for me to figure out like if they just never had a story, or if because they had to like cut it down, they just never figured out how to tell like what was left with the time that they had left, or what. I don't know, but it was just, yeah, it was okay. Like I think there were parts of it that are worth watching. It's not one of those shows that I will say run screaming from, but I would never recommend it to anyone.
Okay, so one that I watched, you did not, and I watched it because the lead actress was the lead actress in Signal, and the lead actor is Jo Ji-hyun, who, God bless him, first saw him all those years ago in Princess Hours, and now is back leading Kingdom, and also an upcoming show about like mountaineer rescue safety something or other. Actually looks really, really good. But that was Hyena. And Hyena was, I honestly didn't know what necessarily to expect out of this show. I just knew it was about lawyers and they were going to be sort of battling each other. And I was like, cool, courtroom drama. I was in a very like courtroom drama thriller phase, so it fit. I didn't realize how funny it was going to be because the playful banter between the two leads, I mean, literally hyenas fighting over carcasses. Like it is so amusing to watch them go at each other while also having incredible sexual tension. There is definitely an episode where like they straight up just sort of like, we're gonna have sex so we don't deal with the like trauma of something that just happened. And I was like, I'm not mad at this. Like in the office, they literally just hook up. And I'm like, I'm not mad at this at all. And they have such an adversarial, like confrontational relationship. And yet you watch by the end, they're banding together because of, corporate shenanigans, as they always do. The only thing that kept it from being great, I do think, was some of the writing on the overall plot, like just could have been a little bit better. Like it really was so close. It was very entertaining, but at the end of the day, it wasn't one I was going to go screaming at people saying this is incredible. I'll talk about the next two shows on this list kind of together only because they share the same lead actor, which is Park Hae-jin. Conde Intern and Forest. Conde Intern, I literally only watched because he was in it. I could actually say the same thing about Forest, though Forest actually also stars Jo Bo-ah, who we will talk about later when we talk about Tale of the Nine-Tailed. Conde Intern is literally about like the case of Park Hae-jin is like, the intern under like a crotchety, cranky manager who's kind of awful and garbage. And then later on, all these years later, the roles reverse and the intern is now in charge and the cranky manager is now like his intern. And so he gets the chance to kind of pick on him. And I was just like, as much as part of this is really satisfying, part of it just feels so mean-spirited that I can't, like, I don't think it's garbage. It is actually still entertaining because the performances are great, but it was really mean-spirited for most of it. And I was like, I just don't feel comfortable that you're making this like almost an Arabuchi. He's not even just an ajushi. Like he's older, and you're just like really shitting on him. I know he treated you terribly, but like, be the slightly better person, please. And then Forrest. What do I say about Forrest? It's like such a guilty pleasure. I like it while acknowledging it is not the greatest thing. I love it because half of it is just nature porn, okay? Like it is so beautifully shot. I don't know where the hell in Korea they shot this, but this mountain village is magical. It is a mystical wonderland. I would happily retreat there and vanish from society. While it then also becomes a thriller of like Aaron Brockovich style and like has this we don't like each other, but then we're eventually going to get together. Contentious romance. Like, it's such a mess, but I can't be mad at it. And I don't necessarily know why. Including scenes where Park Hae-jin sort of like as a joke, the female lead is like, fine, let's date. Like, there's nothing else to do here. And he says, I'm going to make you regret that. Like, I'm going to make you understand words have consequences. And he shows up, and she's a doctor. He shows up at her clinic and does the most cringe inducing eggyo you can ever imagine in your life. Like, baby talk, a massive stuffed animal, calling her like my little princess or whatever. Like, it is so cringe inducing, and it's done on purpose. But I was like, this is like so bad, but so brilliant at the same time. So I can't call it great because I understand that objectively it is not great, but it's really fun and I kind of just love it for what it is. I love it for the shit show that it is. Eccentric Chef Moon, and we must note that eccentric has an exclamation point after it, and I still don't understand why, but whatever. I think it's hilarious that Eric Moon is the lead actor, and he's called Chef Moon. Show needed more romance. That's really the only reason it's not great. It needed more romance. I was offended by the lack of romance. It's just a weird, quirky little show, but I was like, where you pitched me romance? You owe me romance. Though, backing away from romance for a second, Rugal, which I started watching with my ex. I started watching it because he wanted to watch it. I was admittedly like briefly thrown by how many guns were in the show because I was like, this is Korea. There are no guns. Unless you cop or soldier, there are no guns. There's a lot of guns in this show. I was very thrown. And it started out really promising. I love the lead actor. He's in a show called Tunnel and like tons of other stuff, but that's what I'd at least seen him in. And like the villain himself was really fun. Like as I say, he's like deliciously evil. Like he's just awful, but you enjoy how awful he is. But like it never really went anywhere. It just was constantly trying to be like bang bang action. I was like, look, honestly, I prefer it when y'all just have extended martial arts sequences as your action scenes, as opposed to everybody firing guns. And I just kind of don't care. So I just kind of fell off it. I do acknowledge that like it's pretty. The characters are like entertaining. You have all sorts of big different personalities. I just think it tried so hard to be flashy that it ultimately actually just ended up falling flat. One that I watched for the main actress because she's the lead actress of Because This Is My First Life, which is one of my favorite romantic comedies, point blank period, was Fix You. I do take some umbrage with the romance in this, besides the fact that it is wildly unhealthy because the main character has intermittent explosive disorder, which actually stems from borderline personality disorder, and everybody like hides her diagnosis from her for the entire show, which I found really questionable. It's pretty clear she has borderline personality disorder, like a whole bunch of like the various psychiatrists are all like, yeah, that's definitely what she has, but they don't tell her that that's the root cause of her intermittent explosive disorder, which again, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, but that seems like questionable practice. And then also, I mean, questionable practice that then the guy who becomes sort of her main psychiatrist, she then ends up dating. And there is a really big age difference between them. Now, I am not one to usually cry out about age differences. I mean, my own family had a major May-December romance with my aunt and my late uncle. And sometimes oftentimes they're done really well in K-dramas, mainly because I can't tell how old anybody is. Like, I'm like, you're anywhere between 15 and 55, and I don't know. So I'm just going to assume you guys are around the same age. In this case, it's really obvious he is several decades older than her. And it felt like it was a romance, but there was no like romantic tension. And I can't even remember if they kissed in the show. And if they did, yeah, I probably was like, stop. It doesn't feel right. The only reason I don't call it garbage is that the lead actress, like, her performance is really good. Because she has to balance this highly volatile character and swing her through some intense emotions and intense incidents. And I thought she did extremely well. Like, by the end of it, I was literally just watching it for her. And this journey she's going on, getting her diagnosis and learning to control her emotions, which I do not have borderline personality disorder, but I do understand, like, that is extremely difficult. You essentially need a lot of psychotherapy and also medication. which we never really talk too much about medication in the show, which again, I have questions, but. And the same thing goes for the last one of the ones that I have watched and you have not, at least in this category, which is Touch, which I literally just stumbled upon on Viki. Like, I was just hunting romantic comedies, and I was like, I don't even care. Like, just give it to me. And I was like, oh, it's about makeup artists. That sounds like fun. That sounds great. It also gives us another really big age gap between the characters, and the show points it out a lot. Like, they frequently refer to her as like his piece of candy, which is really why? Yet at the end, she's ultimately in many ways way more mature than he is, even though he's like big, fashion, like makeup artist, impressive, and then loses everything, and she sort of has to help him pick everything back up. So, like, it was fine. It wasn't that long. I don't even know if it was 16 full episodes. I loved that the second male lead was the older brother from What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, and he looked even younger in this show, even though this is a newer show, and I was like, did you age backwards? I don't understand. But he has like this like puppy like energy that's so refreshing, and his dynamic with the lead girl, even though he clearly like develops a big crush on her, but she's like, look, you're my friend. Like, go away. She treats him like the annoying little brother, and it's great. So like, it was fun and it was cute. Like, I've definitely seen worse attempts at romantic comedies, but I'm not gonna sit here and say like everybody should go watch it. Also, again, the age difference might upset people. Because one, it is really apparent there's an age difference, but also just the way the show sometimes treats it is a little like, maybe stop. Segueing into two shows that I have not watched, but you have told me about. First one being Hi Bye Mama.
Yeah, so Hi Bye Mama is one for me that like I would say mostly great. Like it's just missing the thing that I would say, wow, this is like a great show that everyone needs to watch. But I have no complaints about it actually. I mean, like other than it's kind of a tragic premise. Obviously, it's a mom died shortly, no, like when the kid, she was in an accident, and I think it was like then the kid was born after she died, so she never knew, but she stuck around as a ghost, and then she basically wishes really hard and gets to be a person again for a short period of time. But as long as she stays human, her daughter is more and more exposed to elements from spirits, so eventually she has to choose to move on so that her daughter can live a normal life. It was a really like emotional show, and I thought it was done really really well because it's got a couple elements where like the father is remarried, but it's not necessarily like a super happy marriage, and he's still really like hung up on her and the guilt that he feels about her death, and so then suddenly she's back, and so they have to reconcile with those emotions. But she develops a really close friendship actually with his current wife, who she feels really positively about because the current wife is her kid's mom and like takes care of her kid and loves her kid. And so there's like that, but it in a lot of ways it was really just like about grief and the catharsis of like the she's back, and so they get to like say goodbye to her because she died suddenly in this accident, so now they have this chance to like have that last hurrah and tell each other how much they love each other. And all those conversations that you wish you had had with someone before they died, they like get to do that before she's gone for real. But it's also rough because like she's back, and so like her friends and her family are like, she's back, and like I don't want to have to say goodbye to you again because I've already said goodbye to you, and the whole thing. So it was like, I mean, like it was powerful and it was emotional, and I thought it was well written and well done, and I was worried about some choices that they might make, especially related to like the first wife is back and then the dad's marriage to the second wife. And I was worried that the story was going to do the second wife dirty, and it didn't. And did a really good job with that whole dynamic and everything there. And the character development, especially of the second wife, which was really good. Like, I think it was just good. Like, I don't have any complaints about it. There wasn't anything about it that bothered me or anything that was bad. But it also was not a show that, like, I would just be like, oh, people have to watch this. Like, this is a great show. Or, like, when I sit and think about, like, what are the K-dramas that were, like, really amazing that I would put on my, like, God tier list of, like, the best K-dramas ever. Like, I would never think of Hi Bye Mama. Alice, I also really enjoyed. Very different kind of show, time traveling. Like supposedly the main character has like an emotional disorder, but writers are not really good with that. Like
They're
they always
not.
use that as a concept, and then do weird things with it. So, but he basically like really cared about his mom, and then like later find someone who like is his mom but not actually, because it turns out his mom was a time traveler, and the whole explanation of it is it's actually different dimensions, but like it is his mom just in like a different timeline where she doesn't like come back and go, and then they have a romance. So that's what really lost this one for me. There were a lot of things about it that I loved the time travel concept that they did with it. I thought it was really cool. Like for some K drama sci-fi's, I feel like I have a really hard time with, but this one, like the lore of it and everything they did with the time traveling and all of that was phenomenal. His dad, who didn't know he was his dad, and their whole like antagonistic relationship that develops, I thought was phenomenal. A lot of it was great. I loved both of the main leads. I thought they were great in their roles. I thought whatever. It's just that she's his mom. And so the fact that they like had to make that a romance, it bothered me. Like there were moments early on in the show where I was like, I hope they're not going there with this. Like, I hope they're not going there with this. And then they took a lot of time to establish that no, she's a different person than his mom, even though, like, kind of they are the same person technically, but different person because his mom was a different dimension because she was in a different timeline and they're not the same. So it's not like this is the past version of his mom. They're now different, whatever. And they spent so much time establishing that I was like, oh no, they really are. They're really going to do this. They're really going to go here with it. And then they sure did. And I was like, it's not necessary. Like, first of all, there didn't need to be a romance in it, I felt like, at all. Second, there was already a character set up who had like been in love with him his whole life who was not like a iteration of his mom. And so like if they had to, like, that's fun, do that. Like, I don't know. It just was like like they could have had a really deep and emotional connection without it going there. So that is my main complaint. But Alice, but I do think if you want to see a good time travel show, that does really cool lore with time travel, yeah.
But at least we've now completed all of our fine slash meh, and we can move on
Yes.
to the absolute garbage of the year. And coincidentally, we are including time travel, the King Eternal Monarch, which has now become our standard for shows we absolutely cannot ever rewatch
Oh
because
my
they
god.
are trash.
Did you know that it just won an award for like the most popular or most beloved like audience show or something?
Are you fucking kidding me?
It's like that hurts me so much.
That hurts me so deep. Why do you hurt me in this way? Internet, you're doing me dirty. This show is utter garbage.
Like, listen, I love Lee Min Ho. Like, I can't fully describe the extent to which I love Lee Min Ho. And I love Woo Do Han. And I thought
Oh,
that Woo Do
yes.
Han was fucking amazing in this role. And honestly, until I watched this, I thought I loved Kim Go Eun too. But now, like, retrospectively, I think I probably don't. Um, but the writing was so bad. So bad. Like this was another one that I watched live. So we waited each week for it to come out, and we would literally write down questions in between weeks where we're like, okay, this is what came up in this episode. Let's see. And it became a game. Like, let's see if they address it in the next episode. They won't. And I had a whole list at the end that was just like it was just such a mess. Like they had this like grand concept, and then they forgot that they actually have to like do something with it. Like it was just like I can't describe the extent to which it was such poor writing. And from this writing team, I couldn't believe it. Because it's not like they're the best. She's the best writer ever. Like, but usually the stories at least are like internally consistent in some way, or not like this big of a fucking shit show. But I can't. I wrote one of the longest reviews I've ever written on my K drama blog for this one, just describing the extent to which it was so bad.
Yeah, I remember when I said I was going to watch it. I like said I was going to, and you'd warned me away from it. It had already finished airing, and you were just like, "Don't! It's so bad. Like it's such a shit show." And I eventually said, "You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to take the plunge and watch this." While watching it while knowing it's not good. And honestly, that weirdly makes it entertaining to that degree. I will say Woo Do Hwan is like the only really good thing about the show, but there's not enough of him, so you almost can't even count it. The CGI is really ugly for a lot of it. It is so hyper saturated that like what could be really beautiful ends up looking garish.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, the writing is piss poor. The romance is so forced, it's uncomfortable.
Oh
Like
my
they are,
God. Yeah.
that was the one of the worst confession scenes I've ever seen. It's just like I'm supposed to believe you love him now, even though you literally have no idea who this dude is. I really cannot explain how there is supposed to be a connection here. We also just know that Kim Go-eun has no chemistry with any of her male leads, and she gets male leads who could have chemistry with brick walls.
Hmm.
Like, and she somehow is just dead. Like, there's just nothing there. There's no chemistry ever. And I'm including things like Goblin and Cheese in the Trap and whatever the one she did with Jung Hae-in, like all of these like lead actors who have chemistry with brick walls and she can't manage. Same goes for this. Lee Min-ho, it's kind of sad that didn't you say this was his return, his
Yeah.
first project after military?
Hmm.
That's sad. Like that actually makes me sad. I'm not the biggest like Lee Min-ho fangirl. I do like him. I think my favorite thing I've ever seen him in is Legend of the Blue Sea. I just think that was my favorite character he's ever done. But even I acknowledge that he's better than this material.
Yeah, it was so bad. But he tried. Like we talked
He
about
tried.
parts of it where like he was selling scenes where the writing was just not there. Like
Oh yeah.
he tried so hard. He did his damnedest, but the writing was so bad and the production wasn't great.
Oh,
And like there just was nothing to work with. Like it was so bad and I was so excited about it too because the trailers looked so interesting. And it seemed like the cast was great and it seemed like visually it was going to be stunning and like this writer has given us some gems before.
her filmography list, I mean, Secret Garden, Goblin, Descendants of the Sun, which she co-wrote with somebody else, and I'm firmly convinced they
Mr.
probably did most of the
Sunshine?
writing. Mr. Sun, which is a goddamn masterpiece, with the exception of
Mhm.
the overly tragic ending.
Yeah.
Like, is a fucking masterpiece, and it's beautiful to look at. Like, she can write dramas that at least, like, whether or not you think they are masterpieces, like, at least have internal logic, and even for being like overblown, are still really entertaining.
Yeah,
I'm
this
like,
was
but
fucking trash.
this was it was like they took concepts from almost all of her other dramas and threw them at the wall and said, "Look, we have drama." And I'm like, that's literally not how it works.
It
Like
was
that is
so bad.
so not how it. And just yeah, like you said, plot threads that appear and are never resolved. Like I'm sad because it started out. I'm like, okay, we have this magic flute, which like I am wildly here for, as I am a flautist, so I'm absolutely here for this. I'm like, okay, cool. We never really do anything with this other than I guess we need to join the pieces together. Cool. A little kid with a yo-yo who apparently controls the universe, but we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, but we have no idea who he
Okay.
is or like what the whole thing about the like lightning scar that they so that's the thing is it's not just
Never do anything with it.
it's not just like little things that were dropped that it's like, oh, and then nothing comes out of it. It's like major fucking plot points and plot arcs. Like there was a lot of screen time given to those lightning scars, and then that whole like, why do some people have it and others don't? And we were stupid enough to try to come up with theories. Yeah, it's just never answered or resolved in any way. Like they just like forget because they don't want to deal with it. Like they're just like, whatever. Like it's not like they even acknowledged it or came up with a stupid answer or anything. Like it just literally nope.
Disappears.
Nope.
It's like, okay.
Like there
I
was like
love it.
half of an
Yeah.
episode where they were literally like
Yeah.
running around trying to figure this out and then just like that's it.
On to whatever plot thread we came up with next.
Like, okay, like what the fuck?
I still think my favorite comment was the one that you said where you guys, while watching it, said, I think they literally just made this show for the on the next episode previews.
Yeah.
All the good scenes are in the previews.
Yeah, and then they don't tie together.
Not at all. They're really pretty, and like fan vidders must go wild for this show because it's like there's a really good fan vid set to a song called Battle Royale, and I'm like, this show has no right getting an edit this good. Like it's really cool, and it makes the show seem amazing. And I'm like, the truth is, this show is garbage, and you don't deserve this. I still can't believe it. I'm offended at the internet for calling it the most popular show, given all of the other shows we got this year.
was so
That
bad.
was the one they hung their
So
coat
bad.
on.
It was so bad.
Yes. Well, the next one that I'm going to label as garbage, and this, as much as people got annoyed at this show, this has got to be a controversial opinion. Record of Youth, which was widely promoted before it came out. It was huge. We had Park So-dam coming off of her amazing success in Parasite. We had Park Bo-gum in his last TV project before he started his military service. This was an entirely pre-produced drama. So the writers have absolutely no fucking excuse for the garbage they put on screen. You had all the time in the world. You didn't have to scramble and rewrite episodes like a week before they went to air. The whole thing was done because Bogum was off in the military. There is no excuse. This show started so strong with such a good premise, a really beautiful aesthetic, and a really great cast. And Park So-dam and Park Bo-gum, like, I was so down for it. I was like, I'm here for it. They're cute. They're adorable. I miss her short pixie cut, but like, I'll get over it. But I'm here for it. And then the show decided this was just going to become the Park Bo-gum show. And the part that makes me sad about saying this is he is very good. He's like, actually, everything he brings to the table for this show is top-notch acting. And they actually write him a really good role, but at the expense of like ignoring every other character. Like Park So-dam, honestly, criminally underused in this show. All of the development we want to see from her and from her character of like, she's a makeup artist, she's getting treated badly in the studio she's at, and eventually she sort of starts, she creates her own thing by beginning as like a basically a YouTuber online and like trying to build her own business. And we see the beginnings of the growth. And then they time skip 3 years in the final episode, and all of her growth happens in that time skip, so we don't get to see any of it. Oh yeah, and also she and Park Bo-gum are not together at the end. They break up because they are at different points in their careers. And I'm like, the sad part is I kind of understand the breakup, but it happens so late in the game and the way they paced it that I was like, really? Because you need to make up in at least an episode and a half if you're gonna make up. Like, you, as I say, the typical end of episode 14 breakup. Like, okay, as good as her reasoning of it was, they just did the characters so dirty, including all of the side characters. The second male lead was done really dirty. The issues with his family, like, were never really resolved. Park Bo-gum's family got a lot of really good screen time, and they were great, but ultimately a lot of that is not resolved. And they made it seem like a part of the big hook going into the back half was that, wow, Park Bo-gum's star is now on the rise. He's starting to like really successful dramas. He's gotten like all these fans. Oh, and then this like fashion designer or like model agent who he knew who was, very outwardly, he was gay. And it seems like they might have had some sort of strange relationship. It's like a lot of hints and no real clear what their relationship was. Like, like, it seems like money was exchanged, but I'm not sure. Was like, am I supposed to imply that Park Bo-gum pimped himself out? Like, I don't know. Well, that guy kills himself. And the last person he tried to contact was Park Bo-gum. And so there's a big media frenzy on it. Except he never really goes anywhere. And it's sort of just swept under the rug. And I was like, okay, I'm very confused as to what that point was. I'm then very confused as to why we just sort of flounder in the back half and don't do anything. To then have him just fuck off to the military for his, 2 year or 3 year service and then come back. And then it's like hinting that he and Park So-dam have like a perfectly fine, friendly relationship, but no necessarily understanding that they'll get back together. And I was like, wait, you pitched me a fucking romance, and they're not together at the end. Also, you did every other actor dirty, and I and a lot of people I was watching some of the chatter online, mostly on like Twitter, on like K-drama Twitter, and a lot of people were really emotionally invested because they were like, oh my God, there's a scene where Park Bo-gum's character, before he goes to the military, he literally sits down and does like a live show, essentially, on like YouTube or whatever, announcing he's going to the military and like thanking all his fans and all this. And they're like, oh my God, that's Park Bo-gum speaking to us. And I'm like, great, write a better plot for it. Like, why didn't we do this at the midpoint? And then have him come back and have to struggle to like maybe regain his career after he'd already worked that hard. Like, I don't understand why this was supposed to be the emotional center point. I don't understand. And so I truly just thought it was garbage. Like, I got more and more frustrated with it as I watched it, especially in the back half. I do think it just utterly fell apart. And I was like, wow, honestly, no. I can't even call it fine or meh. I'm so bitter at it. You criminally underused Park So-dam and I get bitter. Like, I'm sorry. How dare you? Oh, yeah, this next show, Born Again, stars Jung Ki-young, who I love. He has such an interesting face of like I could potentially eat you, but I'm also weirdly attractive, was doing, or tried to do, Wuthering Heights meets Past Lives, which, like, if you're going to take any classic piece of Western literature and intertwine it with Past Lives, Wuthering Heights is a great choice. It kind of almost does it on its own anyway. I cannot begin to express to you how bad the writing was. The female lead was nothing more than a delicate flower, like she had no other purpose. Jung Hyun, God bless him, tried to work so hard with material that was trash. The second male lead, I didn't understand why we were supposed to like him. And I feel bad because, like, technically in the past storyline, he was Endgame, even though they all literally died in the first episode in the snow after, like, shooting each other because prejudice and misunderstanding and nonsense. And I'm like, this is stupid. The thing about, like, Heathcliff and Kathy was they were an extremely volatile relationship and a really unhealthy one, and that's why they fucked each other up and the next generation suffered consequences. Like, I don't I don't understand why we did this. By the end, I was literally like skim watching it. I was watching it so quickly because I was like, just get me to the end. And then we had like brain cancer and weird shit, and I was like, just get me to the end. And the end is actually like, some people were like, wait, so did Jung Ki-young die at the end? We don't actually really understand if this is a dream sequence or real. Help! It was so bad. Well, that's all I have to say about it. It was just so bad.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what I have to say about When I Was the Most Beautiful, which is one that I was super excited about because I love Jisoo, and I don't know, it looked interesting, and it looked like it was going to be another one of those like atmospheric, romantic, like whatever. But like, let me tell you, so Jisoo starts out, he's like in high school, and then the main female character is a teacher. She's like a student teacher, I think she's in college. And he's super into her, and he finds a place for her to live, and they're friends and whatever, and he like very clearly has a crush on her, and then his older brother shows up, who's like a tool bag, and sees that he has a crush on this woman, and so decides that he must have this woman. And but then you're supposed to like him, I guess, because he's like kind of nice and he like is good to her. And then it turns out she comes from a super abusive past because her mom like maybe murdered her dad, but her aunt is a shit to her, and so he like protects her. But then like she's like kind of trapped between these two, and it's like this whole concept of like this love story between the two brothers. But like you already have to hate the older brother because it's not like they met her separately and like both fell in love with her. It's that the older brother like knew about the younger brother's feelings and just like went for it anyway with no basis for wanting to have a relationship with her or for liking her or whatever. And then they get married. So older brother and this girl get married. And he's like a race car driver, and there's a whole thing about like the past and like he maybe dropped his dad off a rock climb. There's a lot of like a whole thing, and the dad is injured, but he's a famous ceramicist, and then the kid is in high school. I don't know. And then so the brother marries the female love interest, and the younger brother's very upset about it, and they like have words and whatever, and then the older brother like fucks off to America and maybe dies, and then it's like years later. This is the first like 3 episodes, by the way.
What?
Just throwing that out there. So there literally got to a point in the show, so I DNF'd this show. Gonna be real about that. There got to a point in the show, and that point was like episode 5, where I was like, I don't know what this show is about. I don't like anything about it. I don't have any interest in wasting my time continuing to watch it. I just don't even know. Like, none of the characters were really fleshed out, or like they kept getting into these like situations that were not set up or that didn't like make sense. Like, especially the marriage thing that was like, wait, what the fuck is going on right now? And it was like, sure, there's a lot that we can learn about like the histories of these people and like all of these like inner relationships going on. But then it very much became a like older brother is dead. And so now a younger brother years later is like, you know, finally like in a position where he can let her know that he still has feelings for her, whatever. But then older brother shows back up and like whatever. And it's like, what the F is this show? Just no, like no. And like in my head, I believe that it was all a fever dream and that Jisoo and teacher lady just were really good friends. And then once he actually was like old enough, kind of like Dosol, like, you know, when he was actually fully of age and like knew who he was as a person, they meet again and fall in love. And that's it. That's the story of When I Was the Most Beautiful in my head, because the actual story is trash. So, Meow the Secret Boy. I This got a lot of hate when it was airing, and I was watching it and I was like, I don't know, like it's not great, but it's like not trash. Like it's kind of entertaining or whatever. And the more I watched it, the more I was like, what the fuck am I actually watching? And I kept like rooting for it to actually get to the point where it was a story that was like worth telling, that was actually about the two like human characters and how this whole experience and the cat becoming human into their lives like helped them overcome some of their past trauma and build their own relationship, because that did happen. But then their relationship ended up being like a friendship because she really was just in love with the cat. And like I need to know who came up with this concept of a story. And also they like changed the lore a lot, but it's not like this is like a human being who like was cursed to sometimes become a cat. Like he is actually a cat who just in her presence can become human in form, but he really is a cat. And so then there becomes a point where like he can only be a cat anymore or he's going to die. And so then she just is never going to love anyone again because she loves the cat. And I just don't need people to romanticize their relationships with cats. And I just don't know who came up with this story. Like really, like it got to a point in it where I was like, okay, like Ella's so cute. Like he's so cute and we love him, and like that was adorable, and the extent to which he loved her when he was in human form was just really sweet. But there is a point where you have to reconcile the fact that he is a cat and she is a human being, and they could have actually like gone somewhere with that, and like, you know, and he's a cat and he gets to be a happy cat and she's gonna love him forever and be the best cat mom in the whole world. And she and her first love, who have now like worked through all of their issues and learned how to communicate with each other and figured this shit out, are going to be together. And that's great. Like, we could have told that story. But no, this was a love story between a human and a cat. And, like, that's all I have to say about it. Like, it was really, and it's not like anything about it was, like, brilliant or great. Like, that's why I put this in the garbage and not just the fine. Like, it really is just a bad show. And, like, disturbing, and like parts of it are cute, but then if you go through the whole story, the way it's written and the way it aired, like it's not cute, it's actually horrifying, and I just don't know why they made it.
I have so
So
many questions.
that is all I have to say about that.
And thankfully, that is the end of our garbage pile. So we get to go out on a high note. And this high note is the shows that are effing great. They're from 2020, starting with the one that was like huge when it landed on Netflix. I guess it's based on a super popular webtoon that I have not read because I literally only read Lore Olympus and sometimes True Beauty. Itaewon Class. Park Seo-joon, who I love so much. Really, honestly, like he's such a tour de force in this show, and he's so good in like every show I see him in. But they gave him some really intense scenes. Honestly, any scene with his character and his character's father like had me crying buckets. The scene where, you know, his dad dies and he's just like sobbing after like beating the shit out of is it An Bo Hyun? Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, who I literally just called that blonde asshole for the whole thing. Um, like when he after like he's just pounded the shit out of him, he's just like sobbing in the rain. I'm like, oh my God, stop making me feel shit. And then his like near death experience at the end, getting to like have that moment with his dad in the like almost afterlife. I was like, ah, why do you hurt me, show? Like he is so damn good. I mean, really, honestly, everybody is so damn good in this show. I also just love
So
that,
good.
so good. And I love that Itaewon, like that little pocket of Seoul itself, becomes like a character. They
Hmm.
really played into like this neighborhood is like a character. And I love how much they played into that. That's one of those things where if you're going to really set yourself in a place, that place better become like a character. And they really leaned hard into that in Itaewon Class. And they used this show, which I'm assuming the original webtoon does as well. I mean, used it to touch on like certain social taboos and aspects of Korean society that are maybe not so great. Like the racism that's there, and their views towards the trans community, which is there. Although she is like the one of the greatest characters in the whole thing, and we love her and stan her so hard. We don't stan her terrible wig after the time skip, but we still love and stan her. And also the fact that like our female lead is basically like borderline a sociopath. Like, not totally mad at it, but like, okay, this is fine. And the soundtrack is banging. The soundtrack is
The
so
soundtrack is
good.
so good. But just everything about the show, the writing, the acting, the characters. So it was so, like, it's a really refreshing show because
Mhm.
the characters don't fit the stereotypes of most K-dramas. Like, they really are different and unique, but they're also, like, dynamic and multidimensional characters that all feel, like, very real.
Mhm.
And the way they melt together and just everything about it, like, God, it was just so good. Like, it was just so good, and the catharsis of it, and, like, even I was so scared at the beginning that, like, it was really gonna be a romance between Park Seo-joon and, like, his, like, first love. I can't tell you how much I hated that girl. Like, I just, oh man, I hated her so much that I don't even,
Same.
like, I might have a prejudice against that actress now. Like, for real. And then, like, it wasn't, and, like,
Mhm.
as the story went on and I was, like, figuring out, like, where it was going, I was like, this is fucking so good. Like, it's so good. Just everything about it was so good, and I loved it. And it was such a good, like, underdog revenge story that was, like, bottled in this, like, warm found family, like, pub thing going on. Like, I just, oh man, like, hell yeah to this show. I must read the webtoon at some point, but I haven't yet. I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, I'm tempted to read the webtoon because I honestly just I'm like, this was so damn good. But you know what character choices I love? The character choices in Lonely Enough to Love, which I had had my eye on and then I didn't watch. And it's literally only like 10 episodes. It's like 7 to 10 episodes. It is super short. And it was effing adorable. Like, look, it was what I wanted. It was easy, it was breezy. I didn't have to think that hard. It was wonderful. There was a really hot bodyguard character who was 100% gay, and I figured that out real early. And they teased that he has a romance at the end, and it was beautiful. And honestly, the lead actor was like really bubbly and just like cheerful. And it was just a delight. There's no other way to describe it. Like, is it the best thing ever? Probably not. Objectively, like, I could sit here and like poke holes at it, but I don't want to. It made me really want to live in a share house like the one that they were in there because it's like, if this is the found family I get, like, fuck all of you. I'm moving into this share house in Korea where I can't communicate with anyone. Like, I just want to live here. I want to hang out with all of the pretty people that are in this house. And the second male lead, he was really hot. But like, we all inevitably knew it wasn't going to happen. That you felt a little bad for him because he was hot. Like, and he tried. God bless him. But yeah, no, I loved that show because it was just sweet and adorable. What was not sweet and adorable, but absolutely phenomenal, and I would happily take a third season of this show, was season 2 of Stranger. I was so excited for this show. After I'd watched the first season, this became like a show I was so anticipating. They were like, "Oh yeah, no, it's getting a season 2, and we're filming it this year. Fuck COVID, we're filming it this year, and it's going to be great." And I was like, Bae-duna, Cho Sung-woo, I'm ready. Are we finally going to maybe give them the romance that you hinted at for the entire first season, even though they have a beautiful friendship? And I will not in any way diss the beauty of the friendship. And season 2 started airing, and I realized I cannot watch this live because I watched the first season in a binge, and it really, I think that show does. I mean, I can understand the entertainment of watching it live because it's such like the writers for this show are brilliant in terms of like how twisty and methodical they are with their thriller. Like they really do like create some sort of weird little puzzle box maze, and they have it clearly all mapped out before they start airing. or filming. Like, I don't think you can write a show this complex and tie all of the knots together the way that they did, especially in season 1 and in season 2, without having already mapped the whole thing. So it's not one of those where I think they were like flash writing, the week before. I'm like, no, this shit was done before they went. It is equally a really good thriller. It brings back a lot of similar themes from the first season, which is like mainly corruption, especially within the police force and the prosecution and how it relates often to big conglomerates, which I'm like, this is clearly a thing. It's also the same conglomerate from before, but now with the daughter of the currently jailed patriarch. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. I wanted more of her character because she was involved in the first season, so bring it on. And it just brings back these characters that I love. Like, I love watching Bae-Joon and Cho Sang-woo interact. It is my favorite thing because he is such an awkward bean because he like cannot emote. And he sort of can, like, he's training himself to be able to do it, and he's a little better. And his interactions with her are the cutest thing. I also love the fact that the characters in show tease them about how it's like, yeah, y'all two are dating, like, just accept it, like, you guys are a romance. How's your, like, Peyton gets frequently teased, like, being like, how's your romance with that prosecutor? And I'm just like, the entire fandom is screaming wishing it were true. Okay, you don't understand. You don't understand how badly we want this. Like, we want it so bad. We want it so bad. Like, give me a season 3 and I want to will that into existence. And very much like the first season, like, they close up everything, but leave it for the potential of like, oh, we could do more. And this is one of the few K-dramas where I'm like, no, keep going. Give me a season 3. I'm okay with it. Because most K-dramas, like, they tell their story and they're done. I really don't need more of it. This is one I would happily take more of it. Like, if these writers can come up with another amazing thriller and do what they did, excellent. I'm here for it. Give me more. I also saved myself the anxiety of one of the characters is kidnapped and we don't know if he's alive or dead for like over half the show, and it is very anxiety inducing, and I was really glad I didn't have to go through that trauma over multiple weeks and only had to do it for like 2 days. And rather like the first season, I did not figure out all of it before it happened, before they were ultimately revealing it. That's still super traumatic to me, the first season, the reveal of who was ultimately the murderer of the initial like crime that set off the whole plot. I was like, look, this character I invested in and his motivations. I'm forever sad that he had to go to jail, and I'm traumatized because I loved this character. And he does cameo in season 2 in jail. Like, Bae Doona goes to visit her former teammate in jail, and it's like beautiful. And I'm like, and then later they tease that Cho Sung-woo's character like sent him thermal pajamas for the winter, and I'm just like, I'm having feelings and I hate all of you. But I love you all too. Oh my god, it was so good. Oh my god, I want a season 3 so bad.
I'm gonna throw Missing the Other Side in here because it's another kind of like cop detective drama type thing. And I don't have, this is gonna be pretty short. I don't have like that much to say about it other than like it's really good. Like, for a detective cop show, and like also it has the element of like the character is able to interact with ghosts that are like all in this village that together, and there's like a whole thing. Anyway, it was just phenomenal. Like, the whole show was phenomenal. It was really well done. I don't have like that much in terms of detail that I want to scream about, except just to say, like, if you love yourself some good detective crime dramas, Missing the Other Side definitely needs to be on your list. It was phenomenal.
I heard a lot of really good things about Missing the Other Side. A lot of people were saying like it's so good. They said it's very atmospheric, like it's really pretty to look at, like the color palette's gorgeous. And I have that in my watch list. Like, I am going to watch that show. Probably now that you've told me it's a cop drama also involving ghosts, and I'm like, we know,
Yes.
I mean, 2 things I like, ghosts and cop dramas. Bring it. Let's talk about Gumihos, though. Let's
Oh my god,
talk about
okay.
sexy nine-tail foxes.
Okay. Tale of the Nine-Tailed was the fantasy epic that we needed after King the Eternal Monarch destroyed everything. So seriously, like, listen, in so many ways, fantasy K-drama epics follow a very similar template in terms of like the meta story that's going on. This one does too. You know, like, it's got a lot of that like meta story happening, a lot of things that aren't necessarily fresh or new, but it is so well done. and the story is so good and the acting is so good. And what really makes this one shine, other than I think like the chemistry between all of the leads, and everything that's going on and the whole lore, like everything they built into it, it was just really well done. The brothers.
They made the show. Like, honestly, as much as I love the romance, fuck the romance. The bromance of Lee Dong-wook and Kim Bum
Oh my
made
God.
the show. It was the best thing. And it was
so good.
emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've talked about this before. We'll talk about it here now that we think like Lee Dong-wook's like chemistry with his male co-stars in any drama he's in are so good. Like they often outshine the romance.
Yeah, he kills the and the romance in this was good. Like
it really was good. Like I rooted for them. I absolutely did. I also rooted for like every side romance that was in there.
Yeah,
Hard.
they just did everything so well, and the romance was good, and you got a lot of it too. Like they got together pretty early on. There were some of my favorite just like tender moments between them, like in the kind of like final arc of the show when they like know what's going on and that one of them is probably gonna die, because like that's always the setup of these, right? Is like you can't both survive.
Of course.
But just like these really beautiful, like tender and sweet moments where they just didn't bother with a lot of the normal K-drama, like, oh, we can't focus too much on this on screen, or like, I don't know, there's like a weirdness in K-dramas around just like quiet intimacy. You don't see a lot of it in the romances, but this one just had like these super beautiful, like where they're just like sitting together and he's got his arm around her and he like kisses her hair while they're talking about something, or they're like, you know, cuddled together. The thing where he was like hugging her from behind with his trench coat and they're just like watching the sunset and having a conversation, and just like these really like beautiful like quiet intimacy moments that like I really really loved. I thought it was really well done and their whole relationship was phenomenal. But really the relationship that was just like made the show was the brothers, and like the long history of their relationship, and then eventually like the way that they had to reconcile like who they were and their past with their love for each other, and like the moments where they chose each other and it became clear how much of like who they were was about each other, and like the love that they had for it was just so fucking good. Like it was so good. It was so emotional. It was so compelling. Both of the portrayals were amazing. Like the last thing I saw Kim Bum in before this was fucking Boys Over Flowers. And I know that he's been in other things, but like that was what I came into this with, like, what? He's playing the antagonist in this like epic fantasy drama, whatever. He killed it. Like he was so good.
Give him all of the awards. Like every award show where he can be nominated for Best Supporting Actor, I want him nominated and then I want him to win. Because honestly, it was like a tour de force performance that in many ways, I mean, he could steal the limelight from anybody. And this is Lee Dong-wook, like doing Lee Dong-wook best. And Kim Bum would just show up and would just like, Lee Rong, our baby. Like our fucked up, like shithead child we love so much, who's like so damaged. But we love him, and oh my god, I mean honestly that final episode I was ugly crying in those final two episodes with his portrayal of Wrong. I was ugly sobbing at my computer while feeling extremely single and just being like, it's okay, I'll take him, it's fine. And just like the fact that family was ultimately more important than the romance, and in more ways than one. I mean, the brothers relationship, Joba Boa's character and her parents, like what a beautiful storyline there, where she just never gave up and she was just dead set on like, I really want to find my parents, and she never got swayed by the romance to forget that mission, which I thought was lovely, because that
was really powerful. Yep.
That, and then also the fact that the big surprise at the end is that the image that the Imugi took was Hell Grandma and Hell Grandpa's son, and then he had a history with that character, and it was just like, oh, how do you hate a family in such a cruel way, where it's pretty clear that both of those characters have never gotten over the death of their son and the fact that he can never reincarnate. Like that is such a trauma to, like, it nearly ruins their relationship. like pretty hard, because that's ultimately the root of all their issues. I mean, besides the questionable way in which they got together, we put the kind of male rape aside. Um, the fact that the Imugi showed up, and like I sort of had a feeling they were going to do that only because the Imugi kept asking, like, oh, they had a son, right? Like, does anybody know what he looked like? Do you know anything about him? Like, he just was a little over interested. And I went, no. Like, he can't, like, he's a bastard, but he can't be that bad. He was that bad. And the fact, like, her reaction to him was so heartbreaking, even though I knew she was going to lose control, and that was ultimately why he did it. But it's like, that hurts. I can't imagine that kind of pain of being like, wow. And then everything he says to her, I can't imagine that kind of pain. And I love the fact that ultimately by the end of it, I was like, I care about the family. I also care about Russian Fox and sweet, sweet veterinarian Fox. Like, they are adorable. They were a side of this
So
at the moment they met. The moment they met, I shipped. I was like, I don't even care. Like, this must be Endgame, please. And the fact that his whole mission was just like healing, he wasn't forcing himself on her, is very much just like, I want you to understand that not everybody is going to hurt you, that there are like actually great people. And some of them are even human, surprise, including that little kid who is
Oh my
my
God, we love
everything.
the child. We love the child.
I love him
That
so
child's
much.
gonna have a really weird life, but we love him.
I love him so much. He's so cute. And like he exists to be cute and he nails it.
Yes,
And the
he
fact that
nails
he's
it.
then the, and then that he's the reincarnation of Blackie the dog is like, oh come on. And really, you mentioned the lore. I do think the lore of this show is such a highlight. It's so interesting. And like, to be fair, I do not know a lot about Korean mythological characters. So they bring in characters, and I'm glad they give little explanations because I'm like, who is this? What is this about? But I like how they tie them all together and bring them all together and incorporate like classic aspects of their mythology while putting slightly new little twists on them. My only complaint with the show, Lee Dong-wook's character likes mint chocolate chip ice cream. This is a fucking crime.
Oh my God.
Mint chocolate chip ice cream is disgusting. I love the fact that Kim Moon's character is like, it's like toothpaste, but I guess with chunks of chocolate. What the hell? And I'm like, thank you. It is disgusting. This is the only bad thing about this show. Although speaking of mayhem and monsters and murder, oh my, Sweet Home, which came out very, very recently, like literally only like a week or two ago. And the moment it came out, I binge watched it. I had my eye on this for so long. Like, I was so intrigued by the idea. I was like, okay, cool. Why not? Then, of course, I fell in love with Lee Do-hyun from Hotel de Luna, where I literally just called him Hottie McHot because he was just hot. And I'm going to get over the fact he is, I don't know how many years younger than me. It's fine. And then he was wearing glasses and it just hits different. And his character is great. Like, actually, honestly, he pulls out a great performance. And he's ironically, I think, the youngest actor of all of the main cast. So not too far behind the lead actor. And I'm not seen Love Alarm, so I did not recognize the lead actor. It is literally the like pandemic lockdown from hell. Is the only way I can describe it. They even at one point go, "Is it an epidemic?" And I go, "Too soon, show. Too soon. Too real. It's 2020. We've been dealing with a pandemic. I really didn't need you to remind me." And I love the idea that these monsters, like, they didn't come from space or like they're not hell demons. These were people. People become monsters, and every single person on the planet has the capacity to become a monster. And it's all based in like kind of the darkest parts of ourselves, those things we obsess over. Like, there's one monster that's called the protein monster. Like, he literally just runs around screaming, protein, must have protein. And I'm like, you were probably a dude who was obsessed with his appearance and getting jacked and needed to eat all this protein, but like, it's clearly masking something bad. Like, it's masking something. And, I mean, the whole premise is that the main character is turning into a monster. It's made very clear by like the end of the first episode, or at least the second. Like, he has one of the telltale signs of it, which is they get these massive nosebleeds, like scary nosebleeds, where I'm like, that's not normal. Your nose does not turn into a faucet of blood, okay? Like, something is very wrong. And so he's fighting this monstrous urge, which became then the interest of, oh, so you can fight the turning process? What exactly is this process? And as much as there's a lot of mystery surrounding, like, well, what caused this to suddenly happen? Like, what is the cause of this? it became so much about the characters and all these different people who live in this apartment complex that is clearly not in the nice side of town. It's pretty like it's not nice. This looks like almost like a projects kind of thing, but like a little further out from the city. And all of these characters have pasts, some good, some mostly bad. They all have some sort of trauma, most of them, which again makes it scary because any one of them could turn into a monster. They can't go outside because the world is filled with monsters, so they lock themselves down inside their apartment complex. Except there are monsters inside the apartment complex and people trapped and like in this, and it's a massive high rise like apartment complex, many floors. And so it really just becomes about survival and how what's interesting is like, yeah, the monsters are really well done. They were done, a lot of them with practical effects, which I appreciate so much as a nerd for it. Like there's clearly CGI and obviously a lot of color grading going on to make it look the way it does, but it is the Netflix money. So it's pretty. The deep commitment to the grunge aesthetic, very much like Strangers from Hell, deep commitment to the grunge. But like it looks so good. It looks so good in all of its dirt and grime and poverty. And also the use of the soundtrack, which is A plus. Look, Lee Do-hyun wielding a fire extinguisher while Warriors by Imagine Dragons plays in the background is like my everything. That is a mood. That is an entire fucking mood. So let's talk about one of your favorites. Like
Hospital playlist.
and Chef, wanna day
Oh my God, Chef. Okay, so now I have to look up his actual name because I just call him Chef so much.
We just call him
Joe,
Chef.
okay, give me 1 second. But while I'm doing it, the hospital playlist, man, like what a fucking great show. I also watched this while it was live.
I
Which was
remember.
difficult. Okay, Jo Jung-suk. Okay. So we call him Chef because we saw him first in OMO.
Oh my ghost.
So I was like, oh, this whole concept of like these 5 doctor friends from medical school who are in a band together, and like this is basically just a slice of life drama in many ways. That's just like totally just about like them going about their lives and the like intersection of the personal and the professional, and so good in terms of like the mini stories inside the hospital, each one of them, and like the patients they had, and sometimes repeat patients, but sometimes one time. Like there wasn't anything about the patients in particular that like tied it all together. There was just a big realism to it of like this is like what it's like to be a doctor and like what their lives are like, and the lack of personal life, but like the way that they carve out these things for themselves. Like it was all so good, and their friendship, which was obviously like the main point of the story, was so powerful, and I was so into it. I have some thoughts about like the doctor romance between Jo Jung-suk and John Mi-do, who this I think was her first drama. She was otherwise a musical actress, which is funny to me because her character in this like supposedly can't
sing.
But I guess in real life she can sing really well, which is hilarious. I'm looking forward to season 2. I know that I think they are doing a season 2. I don't know if it's in production yet or not, but I'm interested to see where that goes because I have kind of like mixed feelings on it. I thought that they did an interesting job with that. Like definitely not out of left field, but waiting till the end of season 1 to kind of like get there with it. However, Yoo Yeon Suk and the general surgery resident, whose name I can't remember, but who was like the most awkward bean. That romance, even though I think like if you go back, I've now watched Hospital Playlist like 4 times because I loved it that much. Like it was so good. If you go back and watch each episode, there's like maybe 5 minutes each episode dedicated to like them as a couple. Like it's really like there's not a lot of screen time, but it is so compelling. Like I cannot tell you how satisfied I was in the finale when they have like their kiss scene and he decides not to be a priest, which he wasn't going to be a priest. Like he was never going to be a priest. It's not about her. Like it just wasn't going to happen. But when he admits that he like likes her back and they have that whole thing, I was like, this is the mini romance that I needed in my life. It's so good. Like I can't handle it. but mostly just everything about that show. Like every single one of the actors, all of the writing, everything about it was just phenomenal. Like it's just phenomenal. It's a wonderful slice of life, wonderful friendship drama, wonderful just like this is life. And like that's it. Like I don't really know how else to describe it other than it's phenomenal. I cannot wait for the next season. The only thing I hate about this is how short the season was. Like I could have watched it forever. I hated that only one episode came out every week, even though yeah, sure, they were an hour and a half each. But like give me my 2 to 3 hours of K-drama a week and give me 16 episodes and not 8. That was the only problem with it, was that there wasn't enough of it and I needed more and I can't wait for more. That's all I have to say. I loved it so much.
You know what? It's okay that you're not okay with that. Because it's okay to not be okay. Yes, my segues are trash, but we love them. It's okay to not be okay. Written by the same person who wrote one of my favorite romantic comedies that is also an office romance, which is Jugglers, which I just adore from top to bottom. Same writer, which is kind of amazing when you consider how different they are. It's okay to not be okay. Look, Soyeji, just what a fucking queen.
What a queen.
It's okay to not be okay. I watched it after it aired, if only because I was just sort of unsure about it. When K-dramas decide to very much focus on mental health topics, it's a lot better than it used to be, but it's still sometimes a bit of a crapshoot. So I kind of like to wait. And this one, I was very impressed with the treatment of these various characters who all either are dealing with some sort of disorder or trauma. Everybody is traumatized in this show. Like, let's just get that off the bat. Everybody's traumatized. Everybody has trauma. And it's all manifested in different ways. But Sangtae Oppa is sweet and precious. And I've never seen a character who's on the spectrum treated with such narrative respect, portrayed so well. I mean, he ultimately kind of is the linchpin to the whole show. Because
Yes.
without him, it wouldn't be nearly as successful as it is.
No,
For
he's
different
absolutely
reasons.
like the central character. He's super critical to it. And I thought they did, first of all, an amazing job with his portrayal, with the like care and compassion and respect for him as a character. He wasn't just like a caricature that was plugged in there for other characters' sake. Like he is fully realized himself,
Very
and
much
really
so.
important. And I also loved the portrayal of his relationship with Gangtae, because it started out so well where like you can see from the outside how much sacrifice Gangtae has made for Sangtae and like how hard that has to be, but all there is love. Gangtae gets so much joy from his relationship with Sangtae and from who Sangtae is as a person, and that was like an incredibly beautiful thing to witness. Like literally like gave me so many feelings. And yeah, they have some stuff that they have to work throughout it, but it's not like resentment based or like I had to take care of you based. Like it goes back to the trauma that their mom basically caused on both of them, and both of them just wanting to like be known and understood fully as human beings, which is a normal struggle that like everybody has. That's more of a sibling thing, I think, than it was necessarily about like any mental health or the fact that he was on the spectrum. And so there was just a lot to that. It was just really powerful. It was so well done. And just everything about it was great. Cause again, it was one of those, like, it was like a dark fairy, like it's based, the atmosphere is these dark fairy tales that she writes that are like really twisted, but also have really important like life lessons.
Kind of like Neil Gaiman-esque.
Yeah. And so like that was fascinating. The whole like feel of it and the visuals and everything. And her character, like, just amazing in that she's not necessarily great.
No, like on an objective level, we could also talk about how the romance is like really not healthy if we
Yeah,
look at it
they got some
objectively.
issues, although they figure it out by
They
the
do.
end. They figure it out, but the way it's done, like she's so charismatic. And it's so just like, ah, God, you just, every moment she's on screen is pure gold.
I mean, honestly, one of
And
my
oh
absolute
man.
favorites. Just almost Suddy. I thought you were the trash can. Like, honestly, that moment lives in my head rent free. Also, the fact that I love Soyuji has this much like deeper voice than especially most K-drama leads like female leads we
Oh
come
yeah.
across. She's definitely in a much lower register. I love it. I've actually read an interview with her where she talked about like she didn't think she was going to be that successful because of her voice, but it lends so much to her character. She's living like walking just like sarcasm, which is my everything, and just like, this is mine, I'm going to take it. I don't like you. Fuck off. There's something about the upfrontness of that, which, like, in reality, yes, she needs help. Like, we actually do need to help her
Yeah.
find a professional and maybe take meds. But in the world of K drama and in the world of it's okay to not be okay, it's amazing. And also the entire, honestly, another moment that lives in my rent free. I mean, her zingers that she comes back with are amazing. The like politician's son who just absolutely flashes everyone he meets
Oh my
and
God,
who's
I
just walking
loved
out.
him. Oh my
Oh,
God.
he's a great actor. I love that he made this cameo. And she comes out and just takes off her glasses and just looks at him like, is this what they call a teeny weeny? Because it's so tiny? And you just watch him deflate. All puns intended. It is so, I just love her. She just, oh my God, I don't know what it is. It is something about how she's written, but also how she's portrayed. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody could have done it like her, which is the highest praise I can really give to an actor in a role. Is
Yep.
like, I can't imagine anybody else in this role. Also, I love the side romance of like the nurse girl and Soyuji's publisher. I
Oh,
weirdly
yep.
was like, I was so into it. I was like, I just, it's so sweet and like pure. And the fact that he like first meets her and she's like wasted out of her mind and bitter and like puking and it's like such a shit show. And he's just like, no, I think I like this girl anyway. And I'm like, we love him. Okay, I also have to maybe add a controversial opinion. I kind of preferred him when he had his goatee.
Ooh,
Like
that may be controversial in this chat.
Mm, like, don't get me wrong, his bare face is very lovely because he's a very handsome man. But I think I just like character-wise preferred him with the goatee.
Hmm.
We watched Mystic Pop-Up Bar together.
We did.
It was
Well,
such a
you had
good
already
time.
seen it. You had already seen
I
it.
had. I
But
had already seen it and I'd been yelling that like you need to watch this. You need to watch this.
then we watched it together. Like Mystic Pop-Up Bar is phenomenal. Just like, and I'll say this, it's similar to Tale of the Nine-Tailed, where like it's got that like kind of built on a pretty classic template for a fantasy K-drama. Like it's got some of those same tropes in there, but everything about it is just so freaking well done. And it's another one of those where like at the end of the day, it's about family. And it's like they're a little found family that spoiler alert turns out to be real family. Um, so many feelings. Like it's so good. It's so funny. It's so funny, and then visually, it's just phenomenal. Like it's perfect, but it also like packs a real emotional punch, and it's just so good. And I think the rewatch value on it is really, really high.
It is.
Especially because Sung Jae like is just the purest little bean. Like he's such a good co-lead character for a show like that because he just really is the most precious being that ever
Yes.
existed. So then like juxtaposed with our lovely leading lady who is just a firecracker of a human being and our favorite chef manager. He's not really just the chef. He just
Manager
cuts
Green.
all the onions. Just
Manager
cuts all
Green.
the onions
It peels all the anchovies.
and peels all the anchovies.
Manager Gui, we love you so much. And he's like so badass by the end. I'm like, okay, do I have to admit that Manager Gui's a little hot when he's
Oh yeah, a little
badass?
hot. Like
Yeah, he's hot.
would not
A
have when I started
little hot.
watching it would not have been like, oh, he's the romantic lead in this, but he sure was, and I was sure here for it. Sure
Oh
here
my
for it.
God. I was like, look, if they don't end up tying, regardless of whether or not they tied it up that he is actually like who he was in the past life, which let's be real, most of us probably figured that out real fast. I was like, don't care. I'm here for this. Like, he's so devoted to the female lead and often in very subtle ways while also clearly being so goddamn whipped. Like,
So
wow.
whipped.
So
But we love it.
we love it. God, that show, I went into it right as it started airing, so I watched it live. Um, Not really knowing what it was gonna be. I just thought the premise was cool. I'm like, it's a magical little bar tent that pops up and like they solve grudges, okay? Now, admittedly, at the time I had not seen Hotel de Luna, which I know if you've seen Hotel de Luna, it's kind of a similar premise in a way, like the bare bones of like you come here and deal with a grudge kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that Mystic Pop-Up Bar deals with like most of the clients, if we'll call them that, are living human beings. There's only like one ghost, maybe like two. Only a hand. Well, yeah, there's only a handful of ghosts. Most of them are living people. They deal with the issues often in their dreamscape, so it's like you can do almost anything there, and it's not going to directly hurt them. So they can like carry out intense revenges, and it won't like really affect anybody. But
But it
oftentimes
helps their
it's
psyche.
yeah, it's all about healing their soul and being like, yeah, you're having this issue, so let's deal with it in a way where we can do it in the most intense way possible while still in a controlled environment because it's a dream, it's not real. But oftentimes does always spill into the real world. And I loved each little sort of like client of the week story. They were all very different, but they were all very emotional and beautiful at the same time with how different they were. And I mean, a couple of them straight out made me cry. Also, all of the flashbacks to the past storyline were amazing. I loved
Oh, yeah.
actually, I loved learning all of the pieces. I like how they spread out when they were giving you the pieces of information that you needed to give you the whole picture. So they start out like you think you know everything, but you obviously don't. You're not getting the full big picture. And I like that they said, no, we're not going to give it to you all at once. We are going to actually very consistently give it to you in small doses over the course of like, what is it, like 10, 12 episodes? It's short. It's a really quick, easy watch. But also then by the end, you're just like squealing and screaming at this found family. And this is why I screamed at Rebecca. I was like, we're going to watch it when she came to visit. I was like, also, it's short, so we can do the whole thing.
And we sure did.
We sure did. There was a lot of time spent just watching Mystic Pop-Up Bar.
Worth it. So good.
Yes. Speaking of worth it and things that I still scream about and that I have watched too many times, no such thing. Do you like Brahms?
You do like Brahms.
I do like Brahms. Initially, Minjay does not like Brahms. There's a whole thing involving like, so classical music nerd me, Brahms and the Schumanns, Clara and her husband, were sort of involved in an almost love triangle. Like Brahms had this massive unrequited love for Clara Schumann, and it never happened. They just remained really good friends through their life. But and even after Schumann died, like he and Clara still just remained friends. She never was like, "No, we're not going to get romantic or anything. Like we're just really, really close." So that actually does tie into the two leads who are in their own sort of unrequited loves with best friends, but then will obviously eventually come together. Now, I have never seen a show that so consistently and beautifully delivers quiet angst. And I mean just like that deep, heart-piercing, soul-penetrating angst that like you love. It is good angst. And it's these two characters who are so like very like painfully kind of introverted, like quiet characters who end up dealing ultimately with trying to become complete people and their relationship with music and with each other and with their friends and how they're all inevitably entangled in sort of like romantic triangles, quadrangles. Like it sounds ridiculous in that respect, but it makes sense when you watch it. I'm just explaining it poorly. The fact that they do go through the consistent episode 14 breakup. I was upset about it only because I loved them, but at the same time, I went, they honestly need to work on themselves for like an episode or two. Like these are characters who are dealing with some very like big decisions, like life decisions. Min Jae's character is realizing, like, I don't love playing the piano anymore. Did I ever really love playing it? Like, he has a lot of trauma ultimately kind of associated with the piano and how he ultimately did a lot of competitions because he needed to give money to his parents because his dad, who we never actually meet in the show, which was an interesting choice, has a tendency to constantly just make bad investments and blow all the money. And his parents, like, depend on him in a way that is unhealthy for him to have been doing that from such a young age. And it clearly takes an emotional toll on him. And he also has a teacher who is supremely questionable, and like not in like any like physical ways, like more like he causes more emotional damage than anything else. And then you have the female lead who she had gone through business school, graduated in business school, and then decided, no, I don't want to go get a job. I want to go to music school. So she's in music school. She's like probably the oldest one there because she's obviously already gone through 4 years of university. It took her 3 tries to get in. And she's always consistently like last chair. But she loves playing the violin, even if she's like told she's like honestly, especially comparative to everybody else who's at this music school, she's not that good. Like, but she loves it compared to Min Jae's character, who is a genius at the piano, but doesn't love it. And like their interactions are so painfully sweet. And it's a lot of oftentimes just like quiet moments. They're together. There's not a lot of bombast, and like the intensity is all very emotional and yet still weirdly quiet. And it's just sweet and soft. And I must protect these little babies of mine. It gave me so many deep emotions when I watched it. Like I was crying from sadness and from joy by the end of it. Like I had all of the feelings. It still gives me all of the feelings. It has some of my favorite confession scenes like ever. I love this show. It is truly like one of the best shows I've ever seen. Like it just gives me so many emotions. I can't. One that I watched very, very early in the year. It's like back in like March. My Hollow Love. Since we already had a talk briefly about AI, here's a show that does AI well. It has Yoon Hyun Min, who I adore, and this is where I first saw him, and I fell in love with him because he plays two characters. He plays this AI called Holo, and then he also is the creator of Holo, who very clearly made Holo look like himself. And they are very different characters. What I like about how it does with AI, what it does with AI, I love some of the use of negative space when Holo is not like in use. So if they're not wearing these glasses and not interacting with Holo, it's like, where is he? Where does he go? One, they kind of show you like, where does the AI go when he's not actively in use? And it's like this kind of dark space. It's psychologically very interesting. But then like when you want him to be there and he's not, you feel that empty space, you feel the negative space where he should be. And it's like, oh, we've really made this AI a character. But also ultimately the journey is between the two leads, which is the designer of the AI and our lead girl who has, I can never say the actual diagnosis of it properly. It's like prosopagnosia or whatever, face blindness. She has face blindness. So Hollow is a great tool for her because he actually helps her by saying, oh, it's this person. Oh, it's that person. And her face blindness is based in trauma, which of course is ultimately connected to the male lead and his past. But his past story is cool because like he's a kid whose mom was a single mom, badass female programmer in like the 80s. And like, come on. Cool as shit. And she's ultimately actually the creator of Hollow. Like the initial version of Hollow was called Hello and was this tiny little thing she made for her son because she had to constantly go to work. So he was often kind of alone and she wanted him to have a friend. And it's really cute, in terms of being like light and fluffy in many ways and like very like pretty, like almost like pastel aesthetic, really pretty, which then comes down to some pretty serious emotions as these characters deal with their trauma and grief. Like it was a really fun show. I really enjoyed it. Like my one little gripe is like, oh, of course they're connected in the past and like XYZ. I'm like, but yeah, that's standard K-drama. I really can't get mad at it. It's just one of those things where I go, yeah, of course they are. Like of course, like some aspects of her trauma being related to the death of his mom. I was sort of like, I didn't necessarily need that, but okay. Like, okay. It's not done badly. It's just me going like, eh. Though speaking of death, the game Towards Zero, which has my lovely Taehyun, who I love forever because I was a big fan of 2PM while they were, I mean, they're technically like still together, but like when they were together. This show I wanted to see because I like Taekyon, but I honestly wasn't sure what it was going to be. And it might have been on like waiting to air. It's like last two episodes, so I think I might have found it on like finale week. It is a thriller, and Taekyon plays a guy who he looks into your eyes and he can see the moment of your death. And this includes himself. Like when he looks in the mirror, he sees how he's gonna die. Which I'm like, I love that they actually included that aspect. Because I always, whenever they have like sort of, as I call it, a narrative conceit like that, I'm like, well, what about their death? Can they see it? And he can. And he doesn't understand what it is because obviously you get no real context for it. So he's like, I die old and alone and holding this like necklace on a beach. And it seems like I'm really sad, but like, why am I sad? I don't know what this future holds. And then, of course, he meets our main girl and he looks at her and he can't see her death. Like, so she is an utter mystery to him and he's totally confused. And we end up sort of learning, not necessarily like the source of where this comes from. Like, they sort of explore it to the best that they can while still keeping it sort of like, if we explain it too much, it's not nearly as interesting. But the one interesting thing is that he starts not being able to see people's deaths when their deaths are directly connected to him, or he might in some way have been part of the cause of it, which is something he actually needs to learn through the course of the show. And it's very interesting when he does, because then he's like, oh shit. And the villain, who was also the villain in Oh My Ghost, and I can't remember the actor's name, he's an
Gu Do-kyung.
thank you, Gu Do-kyung.
Sorry, I'm looking these up as you're talking about them.
Oh, fair. No, that's good because I often will like only remember like one name. He's an interesting character because his whole history, it's a very personal antagonism he has against Taekyon's character. And it's because as they were kids, Taekyon's as the kid, had that reputation of, oh, he'll tell you how you'll die and kids are assholes and like, so he gets brought in by a bunch of bullies and they're like, what about this kid? Like, how's he gonna die? And he tells them, like, I mean, he's a kid. He's clearly shown to be a really little kid, and they're both kids, like elementary schoolers. And so he tells him, he's like, you're gonna kill yourself, like you're gonna jump off a building. And so he becomes so obsessed with this idea. Like, why would I kill myself? I'm not gonna kill myself. Like, I don't understand why this would happen. And he says, he's like, you're gonna kill yourself, and like all these policemen are pointing guns at you, so clearly you were like a bad guy. So this kid's growing up understanding, oh, so I'm going to be a villain who kills myself? Like, the psychological damage that does on a person ends up turning him into a villain. And it's this, and yet he keeps trying to see if he can change fate, or like kind of gives up and decides to prove it. Like, his psychology is very interesting. Like, ultimately he's kind of a terrible, I mean, not even kind of, he's a terrible human being. He does horrid things, but he was such an interesting villain that I was like, yes, I want to follow how this cat and mouse between these two people plays out, because the antagonism is so deep rooted. And Taekyon actually for most of it doesn't even remember who this dude is. Like, he was like, I was a kid, it was like all those years ago. I was like, how the hell am I gonna remember? Like, he doesn't even know who this guy is at first. Like, he meets him and the guy's working in like the freaking morgue. He's like the medical examiner, and like Taekyon doesn't recognize him. And I love that. I love that there's like one character who has such a bitter rage and the other one doesn't even remember him. And it's like, uh-oh. Oh, that's why it turns so personal. Let's briefly keep on fantasy and sci-fi and talk about the School Nurse Files. Only because we slightly disagree on this one. In that I say it's great. And I freely acknowledge, like, it kind of got mixed reviews when it came out. I think people really didn't know what to make of the performance by the female lead, who I adore, and I love her in everything that she does, and she's a queen and can do no wrong, in my opinion. I kind of love how almost bizarrely borderline psychotic she was. Like, her insane facial expressions kind of gave me life. I wish I had more of maybe a romance between her and Nam Joo-hyuk, but that's just because it's Nam Joo-hyuk and I love him and he's a precious being and he can do no wrong. I just thought it was like weird and enjoyable and strange, and like I didn't know what it was going to be when I went into it, and I walked out going, that was just weird. But kind of a fun little like weird, I don't know, like 6 hours I spent watching it. I was like, I really liked that, and I can't explain why.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would, this one for me is like it's good, but I definitely wouldn't call it great. And so part of it is I think it was too short. So I enjoyed it. Like, it's very a feel. Like, whatever it is that. And it was very different. And it came out at a really good time. Like, it came out during spoopy season. And so it was absolutely like, okay, I need this weird show about jelly monsters and stuff. To me, there's too much. So like the scene where the one character is like eating the bugs,
Oh
um
yeah.
like that was too much for me. Like there were parts of it, and there were parts of it that like the body horror like type things like made me uncomfortable to the point of like not enjoying it. But I know that's just me. Like I think overall the aesthetic and the feel of it was very well done, and it like certainly is interesting, and like it's a fun little like horror fantasy thing. But it really, to me, it was just like I can't call it great because it was too short. I just didn't feel really connected to any of the characters. I didn't really have any emotional investment in what was happening. It was just kind of like, okay, like that was the story. And like it's fun and it's well done for what it is. And I think visually it was really cool, even if parts of it were too much for me. I agree. I think the lead actress was phenomenal. I think she did a really good job with that character, and the character was very like distinct and like interesting and good, but also like I just don't feel like I have any sense of like anything deeper for like literally anyone in the whole show. Like it was just a very surface level like visual experience to me. And so I just didn't feel like it was like, yeah, that was great. It was more just like, okay, yeah. Like, yeah.
That's fair because like it very much is. Like I agree, I wish there had been more of it. This is why like I sit here and wonder going, are there more books in this series? Because I know it's based on a book. And I know that the adaptation of the show was written by the author of the book. So like the author of the book wrote the show. So I'm like, is there more? Because like if there's more, grabby hands. Give me. I want. Some of the body horror, there's only one moment of body horror where I was like, ugh, which was like the weird umbilical cord at the back of
Oh,
like
yeah,
his.
that too.
It was the only one I went, oh, that just makes me uncomfortable. Okay. The eating of the books, I'm like, yeah, it's gross, but I just won't look. It's okay. I mean, overall, the jellies were kind of funny looking. Like, and
Yeah.
I think there is this sort of like twisted whimsy to it in terms of the jellies and everything else, and the fact that like her sword is like a plastic toy and she's got a
Yeah, it's
plastic
like a
gun.
lightsaber. Like, like
Oh
there
yeah.
are so many things about it that are really like clever and interesting and fun, but then
Hmm.
it just needed to be a lot more of the
Just
rest.
more.
Mhm.
Yeah. I do also like that Nam Joo Hyuk's character is literally just like a nerd.
Mhm.
But like so almost like a boring nerd. Like there's nothing that makes him stand out, but that's sort of his weird little charm, which is why like their little weird duo. That's why I'm like, I want more episodes of this. I want there to be more books where you can give me more of this.
Yeah,
Also,
so
the
that's
ending
why I
where
think
she,
it was too short. Like I feel like this was like the prequel to a story in some ways.
mm, that's fair, because I can understand that. And I can agree with that. I think I was just so wrapped up in like I love the fact that it is just a feel and a mood and it's just it exists as this weird little thing that exists. I love it very dearly and I can't necessarily explain why I love it so dearly. Speaking also of sci-fi fantasy, you watched one and you told me a little bit about it and that was SF8.
Yeah, so SF8 is it's kind of weird to call it a K-drama because it's a film anthology. So it's 8 short sci-fi films. So they're all just completely different. Like each one is different writers, directors, actors. But they do a bunch of different sci-fi things and tackle different sci-fi concepts, and literally every single one of the 8 was just phenomenal. I highly recommend it to you, to anyone who may listen to this at any point in the future, if you're at all interested in sci-fi. Like it's just they're all short films, all right around an hour, just closed stories in 60 minutes, exploring different potential like sci-fi fantasy concepts, and they're all just wow. Like some of them, they're like, oh God, like the first 3 were really mind-blowing, and there was 1 or 2 in the middle that I was like, this is really good, but like it didn't change my life. But most of them, I would say, like, wow. Like, I even made my dad watch them because, and he does
Wow.
not watch K dramas typically, but they're not K dramas. They're films. They're short films. So not at all in the same like realm as K drama. But he is a sci-fi lover, and he was like really, really impressed by some of them. Some of them he didn't quite get, and I think part of that is like I watched it on Viki, and the translations are crowdsourced, and like God bless the people that do that. I like literally, you give me life, and I love you. But it is a crapshoot kind of between the people who do more literal translations and people who can more fluently translate. And I don't notice much anymore when I'm watching things if they're literally translated. Like, I understand what's going on, and I have enough of an understanding of the Korean language at this point where it's actually weird to me when things are more fluently translated. And like, I'm listening to the structure and then I see the way it's translated, and I'm like, yes, I guess that is how we would say it, but it's kind of not the same and it doesn't have the same feel. So I prefer more literal translations because I want to know like how it was intended to be said, and then I can translate that in my head to understand more like what it means. But anyway, some of these are more literally translated, and I think that my dad didn't quite get it. So he had trouble with a couple of them, but overall was like really, really impressed. So I would just generally say SF8 is worth it, and it's weird to have it on this list because I don't know that it's technically a K drama.
Wait, look, it's a series of sorts. We will kind of, I mean, it sounds almost like it's a Korean version of like something like Black Mirror, a similar concept of these unrelated, basically short films,
Yeah,
with exploring some sort of science fiction concept.
yep,
Also,
that's
I guess
exactly
in
what
this
it
case,
is. Mm-hmm.
which I mean sounds cool. I will have to watch it. It is sort of on my list, but it's admittedly behind a lot of other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those too where you don't have to just like watch all 8 of them at once because they're not related to each other. So just if you
Yeah.
have an hour here and there, just
Okay, so we only have two left, and I'll save the one that we've both watched for last. So I will briefly talk about When My Love Blooms, which stars Yuji Tae, who I adore. And it is so lovely and beautiful. And in some ways, watching it was like, I feel like I'm intruding on somebody's life, and I feel like I need to like not watch. It is, I love the fact that most of the romance is devoted to a more mature romance. I mean, these are adults in their like, we're gonna say like 40s by this point. They have kids. They have or have had marriages that are essentially falling apart or have fallen apart. But they were like, hey, we had this romance when we were in college, which then when you watch it is beautiful and emotional. And you're like, oh my God, y'all were like the legit Romeo and Juliet we needed in our lives. What in the heck? Because he was all like very political and outspoken, was at like rallies, and he was like sort of like a modern version of a freedom fighter, even though it was like the 70s or 80s. So he's mostly talking socioeconomic, political kind of concepts. And she was like the good girl whose father was like chief prosecutor. And she ends up like, she falls for him first and she very actively pursues him in like the funniest, cutest way and just sort of breaks him down eventually till like he can't resist anymore. Even though you can tell like they got chemistry. And it's beautiful. But then as adults, it's so beautiful to watch them reconnect and at first like have this sort of awkwardness around each other. Like, how do we interact with each other when there's clearly a lot of unsaid things that are left from the past? Like, how do we reconcile that when like he's still married and has a kid, and like his wife, at first you want to like, you think she's going to follow the classic second female lead syndrome and like kind of turn into a bitch, and she does some bitchy things. She comes from money, like she has a lot of money. But then they still manage to keep her really human. And by the end, you're like, yes, this is the place she needs to be in. And she's focusing on the things she should be focusing on. And this is a really nice arc for her character. And the female lead, has already been through a divorce and she's trying to mostly just parent her son herself, although the father is still kind of involved. And I love that we have an older romance. There's something about it where it's like, yeah, they've lived more. Like they've seen more, they've lived more, they've experienced more. There's sometimes an exhaustion there that you can just understand because it's like, no, like y'all are struggling and you seem to have almost flipped positions. Now she's the one who will like help workers on strike and whatever. And he is like hanging out with the corporate elites because he married into a rich family. And it's just like, ooh, how did this happen? So the story shows you all of like how we got there, only while interspersed with the, okay, well, here we are. What now that we've somehow met again? And it's pretty clear we still got chemistry. Like the leads in their present day form, like there's chemistry that's like quiet and beautiful and so heart, like, oh, so heart-wrenching. I really truly loved it. And it's also aesthetically really pretty. Like, I just want to point this out. There's some really aesthetic shots in this. They're like, whoo, there's snow and cherry blossoms and use of lights and prisms. And like, I'm like, ooh, ooh, lens flares. Oh, yes. Thank you. Beautiful cinematography. The film nerd in me is so happy. Look, I love when a K-drama is pretty because it's not always the focus. And then sometimes they just get hella aesthetic. And I'm like, oh, When My Love Blooms was just this really beautiful, just slightly more mature romance. And yeah, like I'd heard it was good. I figured it was going to be good, and it was good. So speaking of very good, one that we both watched, I watched first and then was like, I think you do need to watch this.
You were
Let's talk.
right.
I was right. Let's talk about Startup and how Namju Hook is our everything.
Oh my
Dosan and Dummy
God.
for life.
Oh my God. Okay, so like the thing that kills me about this is that I did not know that he was the main character.
It
For like
cracks
the
me up.
first several, so I'm like messaging Mad, well, because she's like, you have to watch this, you'll love it so much. And this is after the disappointment of Dosol, where I was just like, fuck everything. Like, this was terrible. And so I started, and I thought that Ji-pyung was the main male character, and like he was like the ultimate, and I was so upset because I shipped them so early and I loved Nam Joo-hook so much. I was like, oh my God, I love him. And he's gonna be the most painful. I'm gonna have second male lead syndrome. And I was like, I literally like was like rage messaging, like, I can't believe you're gonna have me watch this because I can't, like, I'm gonna have second male lead syndrome so hard. Like, I whatever. And then eventually figured out that, oh no, wait, this is actually the main character.
Well, see, the funny thing,
Everything is fine.
the best thing about that though is that a lot of the internet was having second male lead syndrome with Jipyong. So
How? I don't
they
understand.
just
I read a review that was like, here are 5 things we need from the startup finale. And the author of it, like, I agreed with almost everything in there except for like they were a Ji Pyong shipper. They're like, he should end up with the girl, get the girl. And I'm like, are we watching the same show? Like, I love him. Like, he's a great guy, but the the story is so clearly like he has almost no screen time directly with Susie in that show. Like, he does a lot of things based on his feelings for her, but it's mostly about him and the grandma, and then like him reconciling like who he is as an investor and as a mentor with kind of like the dark history of the one guy's brother. I should really remember his name. I literally just watched this, but I don't. And also just like wanting them to succeed and then doubting himself and like who he has been his whole life, and is he really like a good person, and has he lived a good life, and like whatever. Like, he's a great character, he has a great story, but there is no world in which it would make any sense for him to end up with Susie's character. Like, literally the show is so much about Dalmi and Dosan and their like friendship with each other, the shared vision they have like for this company, the way they play off each other's strengths so well. They have like 95% of every episode is the two of them together, being cute, having romantic moments, working on this like project together, having this shared vision and like believing in each other and whatever. And yeah, okay, so the basis of their relationship is a lie, and that's bad, and it goes on for like way, 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 way too long, but they do actually deal with it, which was good. But I just don't understand. Like, I can understand how people would really, really love Ji Pyong because I do too. He's great. He's a great character. The actor is good. He now has his own like lead role in an upcoming drama, and that's great for him. I'm happy for him. But I am just, it's so unclear to me how someone could have watched that show and wanted anything other than what happened to happen.
so much of the internet did. I was
I don't
watching
get it.
I felt like I'd stepped back in time to the Twilight fan wars, like watching this go down on Twitter. And there's
Okay,
some
to
people
be
who
fair, I was a Jacob shipper. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
we can't speak.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I mean, honestly, like in the grand scheme of things, who cares?
It's Twilight.
It's fucking Twilight.
But
But it
I'm one of those
reminds
people that, yes.
we would have had words back in the day on MySpace. But I mean, it was like I've stepped back in time to that, watching like just really how loud the Jipyong Dalmi shippers were. And I'm like, I agree with you. And then I'm like, Jipyong's journey is more about himself, and his biggest relationship is with Harmony, which is like beautiful. And she calls him good boy like the whole time. And it's like so beautiful. I said, I said, and as much as like, yes, he really liked her, and oh, okay, he wrote the letters. He even has that moment he has with Do-sun. It's either in the second to last episode or the last episode. After he basically tells him, "I'm sorry, I got uber aggressive and like kind of made you think that I was dating her and we were together," and like, yeah, that was a dick move. He makes a point of saying like, "I wrote her all those letters for years and didn't actually like go to her and do something." He goes, like Do-sun read one letter and was like immediately running to tell me.
Hmm.
I'm like, if that doesn't tell you that, like, dude, Do-sun is endgame. Also, it's Nam Joo-hyuk. Like, he is very clearly the male lead. He was the lead. He was the starring dude. Like, he was going to be endgame. And I love how well he played the like painfully like socially almost like anxious he was like I mean because
Yeah.
Dosun can't even look people in the eye. He's so close up and he's like a turtle. Like he goes into his shell and he can't interact with people. And it's really easy to almost overdo that performance, but he did it in a way where I went, "Oh my God, this poor kid is so like he really just need." I mean, I love the Samsung Tech team, and I love his two friends who like really are there kind of to help him interact with other people, even though they are
Although
like,
they're not good at it either.
I'm
No
like
one, no
they're
one's
also
good
big
at
ass
it.
nerd.
All of them struggle. But
Yeah,
they love
they
each
also
other so much and they're so loyal to each other throughout the whole thing. There was no like betrayals. I was so worried about that with this one. Especially there was like a really ominous moment in one of the early ones where the one character is backing up their stuff. And like the voiceover and the music that was playing while they just showed that scene of like him backing up their files, I was like, are they gonna do something with him where he is gonna like sabotage them and destroy them? They didn't though, and that was one of the things I loved about this show is they didn't create unnecessary drama or like do things with characters just to like make angst happen where it shouldn't, because so clearly those three were so dedicated to each other and so loyal and such a team that there was no iteration of the story in which it would have made sense for them to not be that way. And so I loved that the story was true to that and true to their dynamic and their characters and just kept that throughout the whole thing. Like it was like no matter what happens, they're doing it together, and it's going to happen for them together, and I loved that.
same. It's such a like as I said, the Samsung Tech Squad, I love them. They live in my head rent free. They're so loyal to each other. And I love the fact that ultimately this show is in its way like um it basically says almost like here's to the dreamers. Like these people all
Yeah.
just have these dreams and it's like but they do also show that you got to work your ass off for it. And it might not always work. It also does admittedly have one of the best cameos ever at the end of the show with our little baby Hotel de Luna investor boy
Listen,
whose voice has
Eugene
been there.
Eugene Gu, God bless him.
And it was such a beautiful moment of, I liked your voice. And I'm like, don't make me fucking cry again, show. Like, I already cry every time Halmoni is on scene because I love that actress so
Oh my
much.
God, and she luckily got a part like worthy of her in this. I think
Oh,
like they let her be the character she needed to be and have the dynamics and the whole story and her own arc in a way that just like, oh my God, it was so good. Like I think that was what was so excellent about this show is that it really like knew its characters and was interested in telling their story in a way that had some emotional and painful moments, but overall was about like the dreams and the triumph. And so even though there were parts that like, yeah, like I cried and like parts of it were painful, overall it just was this really good, hopeful, wonderful feeling in the
hmm.
show. And that came out in like all the characters' various stories, but generally just like the whole thing was just amazing.
It's just very also, I mean, ultimately it leaves you feeling really happy. There's so much charm and just it's lovely. It's just a
Yeah.
lovely show with characters who are all eminently likable, and even the ones who you don't like it's kind of fun to not like them.
Hmm.
And especially characters like Dami's sister, who's like has such a great arc going through the show and the inevitable and love wonderfully well earned reunion with her family,
Hmm.
and coming back into that fold. Top to bottom, that show from the get go was great. Like it started out so strong and maintained through its whole run. which is
Yeah,
very impressive.
and I will say, so we've talked about a lot of things tonight that went wrong or that were done poorly in other shows where similar things happened in this show and they actually did it well. So I want to like highlight those a little bit. So, for example, we had the separation and time jump of our two leads in this one. It happened earlier in the show, which was great. Um, During the whole like they were acquired and Dalmi gets fired, but Dosan is hanging on and wants to fight it, and she breaks up with him because basically she wants him to be able to pursue his dream, and I think to some extent she doesn't want to feel like he gave up on something big because of her. But like they hurt each other in that period, and it takes like four, I think, episodes after that for them to like fully resolve that and figure it out and get to, and they have to talk about it and they have to work through it and they have to like go through that whole experience and actually like grow as people and then like confront the pain that they've caused each other and have like this back and forth. Like, so in that way, yeah, like that was well done. Like, if you have to have we have to break them up and have them separated for a period of time for various reasons, like it worked for the story.
It did.
And then for their relationship, I also got the catharsis of it wasn't just like, oh, he's back and now they're back together. Like, even though, yes, I wanted that. Yeah, I wanted them to just like immediately be back together when he came back. But they definitely like went through the whole like, hey, like we actually caused each other pain by this. And there was like stuff that happened back and forth that was not okay. And we had some stuff to work out and we have to take the time to work this out and talk through this and figure it out before we can move forward. And they actually like did that, which was magical and amazing. And they also stuck the landing on the ending for this one, which like, okay, to be fair, all of the shows on our great list like stuck the landing. We haven't talked about that in all of them necessarily, but we mentioned it with some. But this one especially, like, it was so good. And like I wish that there wasn't this weird thing where in rom-com like happy shows, it feels like writers, at least in 2020, kind of felt like they had to like have a tragic or like bittersweet or just like surprise ending of some kind or something to like give it gravitas. This one did not. It had a trajectory for the story, and it was like, look, we are going to let them be together and we're going to let them be successful and like achieve this dream that they've had the whole time, which was a deeply personal dream for at least one of them. And then the other one's kind of dream was her. So, like, it all worked out. Like, he was able to put his genius together to solve this issue. Like, her dad died because he got hit by a car, and her grandma is blind, and so she can't like move around. So they want these self-driving cars that are going to be safe and prevent those things from happening and allow people that have these disabilities to actually be able to like get around and experience everyday life. The whole thing with Noongill, like their first app, and like the whole concept of it being just like you should be able to have everyday experiences. Like, we're not trying to do something crazy here. We're not trying to like change the world for people. We're trying to allow people to, even as they lose vision, continue to have those everyday experiences that we all take for granted and do all of the things that we all take for granted. Like, it's just so like super powerful in this quiet and wonderful way. And then they got to be successful and they got to do what they set out to do and make it happen. And then also like be together all as a team and then also like romantically and as a family. Like, it was just like, talk about like, yes, like I needed that. My 2020 needed that. Like, this year was shit and I needed a show that just allowed me to like feel good and feel hopeful and get that catharsis of like we are making the world that we want to see happen. And I just was like, yeah, like this is a great fucking show.
Yes, I agree. Like startup really swung for the fences in its end and like gave you this beautiful kind of almost like a classic like Hollywood home run ending while also letting you know like, hey, we were kind of touching on some societal things here. Like ultimately this was all about helping everybody be able to live the same experience as everybody else regardless of what was happening, like whether they are terribly losing their vision or whether like they can't really drive anymore, like they should still be allowed to experience those things because we're all human. And I love that it sounds like such a simple message, but it ultimately is very powerful because of how well it's done. Also the fact that Dosan constantly speaks with Harmony to be like, how's Noongill? Like, how's the app working? Is it not working? I will talk to them. Like, their relationship was also adorable. I was just like, oh my God. And I like, and he does it because he loves Dami so much. Like, look, we thought nobody could take the crown from Hyung-sik in Strong Woman Do Bong Soon for how devoted the male lead is to the female lead, kind of from the get-go. Like,
But
from the
he
beginning,
does. He
he
is the
stole
new
it.
standard. He's the new bar. Like,
He's like,
you get me a male lead that is more devoted than Dosan is to Dalmi, and I will, man.
tip my
Like,
hat because I don't
ooh,
see how you could. Because from the beginning, and even when they're going through the period, as you said, like they've broken up and they have to like kind of deal with the scar tissue they left behind with each other.
he shows
Like,
up for her in an instant.
oh yeah, the moment he's like, you're getting hacked, we're on our way there. Like, no problem, I'm there. Like, he is still so devoted to her while acknowledging, like, no, you hurt me and I'm still mad at you. Like, I'm like,
Yeah,
but
like,
on this
we're not
front,
okay, but I'm gonna make
but
sure you're okay.
right. Like, absolutely. And I go, that is the new bar in K-dramas of like male lead devotion from the beginning that pretty much never wavers. Just a gold, diamond, platinum standard that cannot be reached.
Like, oh man, like, what a romantic lead. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. I
It's so
do
romantic it hurts.
I do also want to say about the romance for this one. So I understand that it comes like it starts from a problematic place and that she thinks that he is her first love who wrote her the letters and it's a lie because he's standing in for Ji Pyung because she already knows Ji Pyung and they don't want to admit that it was a lie that they made up and whatever. But then he absolutely falls for her. But like honestly, their relationship is so pure and so real that like it isn't heavily reliant on that, even if the story keeps revisiting that like we got some problems here. But I do think one of the best like romance moments in a K drama that I've ever seen is in I think it's episode 15. When he asks her again, "Why do you like me?" Which is a callback to the beginning of the show where he's asked her a couple times, "Why do you like me?" And like the first time it was all of the reasons that she liked him were because he was who she like the original Dosan who was a lie who wrote the letters whatever but then also she liked his hands and like that kept coming back and was actually a really powerful imagery thing that like was beautiful throughout the show but then when he revisits that and he's like why do you like me and she's like why do you keep asking me this question like whatever why do you like me and then she's like literally like there doesn't have to be a reason I like you because you're you and like that's all there is like you to me like not only is that like just because of the way the show has been written and built like it was a beautiful thing but also from like my soapbox about like relationships and how they work like I just like applause to the writers on that because it is in my opinion problematic how focused people are on like what is the reason that you like me and then it's like that creates this weird like tension of like so now I have to focus on that or change something about myself to like amplify that and then like what if that's not true about me anymore then are like we not whatever just that like it's you like it's who you are what I like it's not like these weird things about you that I'm pulling together or like these abstract things that could change or like are immovable. It's like you and who you are. And I just, oh man,
I
I'm
feel
like
so
fucking here
single.
for it.
So here for it. Someone ship me a Namdo-san, please. I would like one in a box, please.
Nam Do-san is the male lead of 2020 who gets the crown for
He
me in
does.
terms of the best romantic lead that was written this year. So anybody who was saying that the other guy should get the girl, listen,
We
you're wrong.
just accept that you're wrong. Now accept that you're wrong and stay there in your wrongness, or however the quote from the West Wing goes. Like, just no, no, no. I love Chip Young. I love his arc. I love that actor. He's actually in he's the second male lead sort of in Strongest Delivery Man, which dropped on
Oh
Netflix
yeah,
very
you loved
recently.
that. Yep.
It's really fun. High recommend. He's in the secondary romance and he's very entertaining in it. And I think he's also in like 100 Days My Prince and like a handful of other things. But and I am glad to hear that he's now getting a starring role because I think he did extremely well in this show, but like he was never going to get the girl. The show
Correct.
never gave him a shot in hell to get the girl. So like, don't be bitter about it. This is not like Sung Young Kwan's scandal where like we were all in second male
Ooh,
lead
oh
syndrome with
God, yeah.
Yuan,
Mm.
which I know you were like having a moment being like, oh my God, it's going to be a repeat of that. Because that was still the funniest moment where you're just like, you were talking about
I
Dosan, and I'm
was
like, you need
so
to
sure.
specify which Dosan.
I was so sure that Dosan was the second male lead, and I was so upset about it. And this is in like the second episode. Like the already in the second episode, I was like, I ship Dosan and Dummy so hard. I don't ship the other two. I don't understand. Like, I get why people have second male lead syndrome in this show because it's so stupid. And then you were like, wait a minute. No, 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 no.
I needed you to clarify who you thought was the second male lead, because I went, the problem is if you say you're second male lead syndrome, I'll go, understandably, because so many people did. But I'm like, oh no, you just think the male lead is the second male lead. Like, I was just sending pictures like, Dosan on right, Jippy. I'm like, which one are you talking about? But there we go. I mean, overall, 2020 in dramas, we had a lot more great ones than we did garbage ones.
I think
Probably a
it
little,
was overall a very good year for K-dramas.
yeah, overall very good. I think this year also Netflix kind of stepped up in terms of the ones it was producing on its own.
Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
I realized I forgot to mention season 2 of Kingdom, which I would put as great because that show is great and it's beautiful and it is entirely done by Netflix. So like the Netflix money is like they go balls to the wall with how gorgeous that show is. And it's historical and it's great. And I hate zombies, but it's a zombie show and I adore it. It's because all the zombies are done practically. It's all people in makeup, in prosthetics, and like contortionists and like whatever. Though there's really not that much body horror. And it's still very emotional and court politics. And I was like, the queen is ultimately like the biggest villain of them all. And I'm like, bitch, I want them to roll up to that castle. I want her to be in full regalia on the throne holding her fake baby. Like, they gave me that moment. It was, I want it to be the most extra. I want her to do the absolute most. And she does, and they do. And it's literally my everything. And we will get more of that show, and it'll be great. Also, that writer is fantastic because it's the same writer as Signal, so she knows how to break our fucking hearts in ways that hurt so much. But like overall, 2020 was a really good year in K-dramas, and even though I spent most of it like just catching up on the massive backlog that I had not watched in so many years, like the ones that aired in 2020, I'm very impressed with. There were some that like really tried to take chances and some that worked out really well and some that like, face planted or like were just bad from the beginning. It's fine. We talked about them. But overall good. I'm like excited for the stuff that's either gonna like is airing now and will complete in 2021 and that will come like air in 2021 because there's some good stuff slated to air.
Oh yeah.
I'm very excited. But there we go. We will sign off from 2020. Enter 2021, where we will have many more discussions on various K-dramas and yell and flail about them. And it'll be great.
Yeah.